Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Becomes Ultimate Creator? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku Midoriya, formerly known as Yagi, was an 18-year-old with a unique appearance. His right eye was a vibrant green, while the left shimmered silver. His black hair, accented with green highlights, was neatly trimmed on the sides, with the top pulled back into a short ponytail reminiscent of Aizawa's style. Izuku possessed a remarkable quirk called realize, which allowed him to control matter at an atomic level. He could create anything as long as he understood its chemical composition. However, creations made from matter drawn from the air were unstable and would decompose over time. This ability placed immense strain on his mind, leading to severe consequences if overused. In addition to his primary quirk, he developed a pseudo-quirk known as warlord. When activated, it removed the body's natural limiters, flooding him with adrenaline that enhanced his strength, speed, and reflexes. His eyes glowed with their characteristic colors, leaving trails of green and silver as he moved. Despite its power, this ability was limited to 30 minutes a day, and overuse could result in physical shutdown. In this alternate universe, UA was reimagined as a university, with most characters aged up. This change aimed for a more realistic portrayal, and the university had a dorm system from the outset. Unbeknownst to the public, secret wars raged between international villains and countries, hidden to maintain order and prevent panic. An organization called Parabellum was tasked with managing these threats and overseeing corrupt heroes. They often orchestrated accidents or villain attacks to subtly eliminate corruption, preserving public faith in the hero system. Very few were aware of Parabellum's existence, primarily high-ranking government officials and the top 10 heroes. Izuku's backstory was one of hardship and resilience. He had endured torment and neglect from ages 4 to 8 and spent 2 years as a captive from ages 8 to 10, suffering greatly during that time. After his quirk manifested at age 10, he trained under Hisashi Midoriya, the commander of Parabellum's Japan branch, who later adopted him. Izuku displayed genius-level intelligence, using his quirk to reinforce his muscles and bones, making him stronger and more durable. He became one of the 7 S-ranked soldiers in Parabellum, known for his strength and combat prowess. Despite his formidable abilities and rank, Izuku remained humble and caring. After his childhood dream of becoming a hero was shattered, he came to understand that peace often required sacrifices and that not everyone could be saved. He chose a different path, one of an unsung hero, a soldier dedicated to removing evil without the need for flashy costumes or fame. As the story unfolded, readers would discover more about the intricacies of this world and the challenges Izuku faced on his journey. Hisashi leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He knew his son Izuku would not take the news well, but they had no choice. Sitting up straight, he glanced at Izuku, who had grown from a small, cute child into a tall, muscular young man. Izuku stood at 6 feet 2 inches, his uniform pressed and ironed, yet it barely concealed his well-developed physique. His most striking features were his eyes, one a deep emerald green that seemed to glow at times, and the other a pale silver, reminiscent of soft moonlight. Izuku's face was nearly perfect, save for a scar running from the top of his left eyebrow down to just above his jawline. Under each eye lay a unique formation of freckles shaped like diamonds. His hair, once unruly, was now neatly trimmed and pulled back into a short ponytail. Hisashi attempted to lighten the mood with a smile, saying he wasn't serious, but rather, he was Hisashi. Izuku shook his head in disbelief, feeling exasperated by his father's attempt at humor. He recalled the dry-eyed hero he had met not long ago, who had a similar grin. Despite the annoyance, he smiled at the memory of that encounter. Even though that hero had an irritating laugh, he was one of the few who had managed to outsmart Izuku. Bringing his focus back to the man who had raised him, Izuku acknowledged his father's attempt to lighten the mood but pointed out that his smile might scare the recruits away. He chuckled before getting serious again, asking his father to explain the situation clearly so he could understand the mission ahead. He was determined to follow through on any orders given to him. Hisashi got straight to the point. Izuku had been assigned 2 missions, and failure was not an option for either. The first was to go undercover and join the hero course at UA University, where he would protect the students while keeping an eye out for potential threats. Izuku stiffened at his father's words, realizing the gravity of the situation. He grimaced at the thought of the increasing villain activity, which he had noticed but thought was manageable on the hero side. Hisashi explained that while things seemed calm now, he felt it was the calm before the storm. The pressure was building, and it was only a matter of time before trouble would arise. Izuku pondered how a spike in villain activity could lead to issues at UA, and suddenly, the realization struck him. Spies, recruiters, and traitors were the threats he had to consider. He understood the mission and the need for someone to take it on, but he questioned why it had to be him. Hisashi leaned back in his chair, contemplating how to answer. After a moment, he raised 3 fingers. He explained that it wasn't just Izuku, his entire team would be divided and sent to different schools with a partner. Izuku would lead the lighthouse strategy. Second, Hisashi emphasized that Izuku was the best choice for the mission, especially since UA would likely be a major target with All Might starting there as a teacher. The mention of All Might's name made Izuku clench his fists, knowing that the hero had made many enemies over his career. Finally, Hisashi revealed that Izuku had been requested by name. Izuku was taken aback, wondering how anyone could know him when he was presumed dead or missing. Hisashi reassured him that the principal of UA, Nizu, was an old friend, which eased Izuku's concern somewhat. Hisashi then mentioned that he had one more point to make, which puzzled Izuku. He teased his father about forgetting how to count, but Hisashi explained that he was trying to sneak in information related to Izuku's second mission. Curious, Izuku asked what his second mission was, recalling how his teammates had tried to set him up on dates. Hisashi reminded him of the words he had used to reject those offers, and as Izuku began to connect the dots, his father finished the thought, suggesting that if Parabellum wanted him to get married, they would issue him a wife. The weight of the situation settled heavily on Izuku as he processed the implications of his father's words. It had been a few hours since the plane's wheels had lifted off, and Izuku sat alone on the small jet used by Parabellum. In his hands were several case files, one on his partner for this mission and another concerning a more personal issue. Izuku couldn't believe the situation he found himself in. It was a quirk marriage, something that neither his father nor Parabellum could deny. His thoughts had transformed from the mutterings of his youth into full-blown conversations with himself. Some personality quirks just never faded away. He pondered the Yayorus family, one of the wealthiest and oldest military families in Japan. Why would they want a quirk marriage with a simple captain from Parabellum? He felt trapped the moment they had chosen him. There was no way to defy a family that funded 80% of Parabellum's operations in Japan. His gaze returned to the file on his bride-to-be. Momo Yayoru, age 18, blood type A, birthday September 23, height 5 feet 8 inches. He chuckled at the redacted weight, appreciating that someone in the intel department had shown some decency, or perhaps it was because the information had come directly from the Yayorus. Her quirk, creation, allowed her to create anything non-living using the lipids within her body, as long as she knew its chemical makeup. That explained why they wanted him. His quirk, realize, was quite similar to her creation. If they could combine the two and find the right balance, she would be able to create anything at any time without cost. Izuku felt a blush creep onto his cheeks as he realized he had, albeit briefly, imagined having a child with a girl he had never met. There was no picture either, but it didn't matter since he couldn't back out of this arrangement. He just hoped she was a good person. With a sigh, he decided to set this problem aside and let his mind wander back 10 years to the day he finally broke the day All Might couldn't save everyone, the day his father chose his sister and left him to fend for himself. Flashback 10 years ago. Izuku struggled to rise from the ground after yet another encounter with his former best friend, Katsuki Bakugu, known as Kaken. The pain from the burns caused by Bakugu's explosive quirk would eventually fade, but the sting of his twin sister Izumi's words lingered far longer. She had told him he could never become a hero without a quirk, labeling him a useless waste of space. finally managing to sit up, Izuku felt pain radiate through his body. Suddenly, he felt his hair being yanked, forcing him to look up into Bakugu's fierce red eyes. Bakugu sneered and asked if Izuku wanted to know how to get a quirk. When Izuku nodded, Bakugu smirked, as if he had anticipated the response. He cruelly suggested that Izuku should take a swan dive off a roof and hope for a quirk in his next life. With a kick to Izuku's chest, Bakugu sent him back to the ground, laughing as he and Izumi walked away. Izuku lay there, contemplating why his life felt like a never-ending nightmare. He thought to himself that it wasn't his fault he was quirkless. Why did he need a quirk to be a hero? Why did he need one to be loved by his family? Tears welled in his eyes as he considered how, when he returned home, neither his father Toshinori Yagi nor his mother Inko Yagi would even spare him a glance. They had always favored Izumi since discovering her powerful telekinesis quirk. Suddenly, words from a pre-quirk-era book he had read came to mind. Adversity builds character, character builds morals. Those with morals are just, and those who have justice in their hearts make the greatest heroes. Those words had stuck with him, offering a glimmer of hope that all the pain he endured would one day lead him to become a great hero like All Might, who saved everyone with a smile. A voice called out to him from behind, asking if he was Izuku Yagi. He answered without thinking, but before he could process anything further, everything faded into darkness. Time skipped to nightfall. Izuku awoke to a sharp pain in his face. Initially, he thought it might be Bakugu or Izumi returning to hurt him again. However, as he opened his eyes, he realized he was no longer at the playground. Instead, he found himself in a dark, dirty room that smelled of dust and something he recognized all too well. Blood. The overpowering odor sent chills down his spine, and for the first time in his life, he felt a deep, primal fear. A shadowy figure addressed him, apologizing for striking him but explaining that time was short and they needed to begin their show. Izuku tried to scream but found he was gagged and bound to a chair, something covering his face. The figure raised an arm and gestured toward a screen. Izuku's eyes widened with hope as he saw All Might, the #1 hero, but something felt off. All Might was not smiling. All Might confronted a figure known as All for One, expressing disbelief that he was still alive. Izuku felt a surge of emotions as he recognized the intensity of All Might's rage. All for One then presented a cruel choice to All Might: save his daughter, Izumi, the successor to One for All, or save Izuku, the quirkless boy who had been mistreated and forgotten by his family. All Might's determination to save both was palpable, but All for One revealed that Izumi had been poisoned and had only half an hour left. Izuku watched as shadows covered All Might's eyes. He believed his father would never make such a choice. He was All Might, the hero who saved everyone. But what he heard next shattered his hope. All Might whispered Izumi's name, and the weight of that moment crushed Izuku. All for One taunted All Might, suggesting he had already won. He approached Izuku, lifted his head, and removed the cover from his face and the GG from his mouth. A light shone down, revealing Izuku's face to All Might. All Might's voice trembled as he recognized his son. Izuku mustered the strength he had left, locking eyes with the man he once idolized. Izuku's heart ached as he asked why his father hadn't saved him. Izuku's last words echoed in All Might's mind as the screen faded to black. The look in his son's once bright green eyes had turned cold, as if he were already lost. All Might's fist struck the nearby wall, frustration boiling within him. He couldn't accept that Izuku was gone. It had been a day since he had been forced to make an impossible choice, and now his son was in the clutches of a monster. Grand Torino, his old mentor and friend, urged him to calm down. He reminded All Might that they needed to think clearly and find a clue. All Might expressed his anguish over failing to save his son, but Grand Torino insisted there was nothing more he could have done. He suggested that All Might return home to check on Izumi, his daughter, and comfort his family. Perhaps, he said, Izuku had revealed something important before his disappearance. Reluctantly, All Might nodded and turned to head home. Meanwhile, Grand Torino was approached by a police officer who inquired about All Might's departure. The officer revealed they had found something and believed it was best for All Might not to see it. Grand Torino, fearing the worst, followed the officer to a separate room. There, on a small table, lay a discolored mound that made his stomach churn. It was a small, bloody object, almost unrecognizable, but its color gave it away. It was the poor boy's eye. On his way home, All Might tried to recall everything the villain All for One had said, searching for any clue that could lead him to his son. All for One had presented him with a cruel choice: save his daughter Izumi, the successor to One for All, or sacrifice her to save a quirkless boy who had suffered at the hands of his own family. All for One had taunted him, suggesting that he had created a true monster of a successor for himself. All Might froze, realizing he had pushed thoughts of his son out of his mind. He struggled to remember the last time he had spent time with Izuku. The villain's words echoed in his head: his son was quirkless, just like he had once been. Memories of his own childhood flooded back, reminding him of the pain of being an outcast. Tears welled up as he recognized the similarities between his past and Izuku's present. Arriving home, All Might powered down as he stepped through the front door. In the kitchen, his wife Inko, the number 16 hero Verde Esper, and their daughter Izumi sat at the table. Inko's eyes were red and swollen but filled with hope as she jumped up to greet him. Inko asked if he had found their son, while Izumi anxiously inquired about her brother's return. All Might's heart sank as he replied that they had not found him yet, but he would not give up. He needed to ask Inko something important. When he pressed her about the last time she had seen Izuku, Inko recalled helping Izumi with her homework the day before they were taken. Panic set in as she realized she couldn't remember the last time she had seen her son. All Might embraced Inko, sharing in her anguish. He then turned to Izumi, asking if it was true that she and her friends had been hurting their brother. With tears in her eyes, Izumi admitted it was true. She explained that she had been afraid for him, believing that if he became a hero without a quirk, he would be in danger. Her misguided intentions had led to terrible actions. All Might took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. He understood that Izumi loved her brother, but what she had done was wrong. He assured her that they would find Izuku first and then work to make amends. Together, they would let him decide how to handle the situation. Izuku traced the scar on the left side of his face with his hand, a familiar gesture whenever he recalled that fateful night. He had never regretted his actions that led to the loss of his left eye, though he still found his new one somewhat unsettling even after 4 years. A pilot approached him, interrupting his thoughts. The pilot informed him that they had landed 10 minutes ago. Izuku apologized and extended his hand for a handshake. The lieutenant introduced himself as Kusuke-ndu, expressing his honor in meeting Izuku. Izuku humbly replied that he didn't feel special enough to warrant such honor but was pleased to meet Ndu. He then requested that Ndu follow OPSEC protocol and handle some files he had been reading during the flight. Ndu agreed but questioned whether Izuku truly didn't need the files. Izuku assured him that everything was in his head and wished him to stay safe. As time passed, Izuku encountered Nizu, who was in the middle of a laugh. Izuku interrupted him, playfully calling him annoying. Nizu responded by teasing Izuku about still interrupting adults. Izuku then exchanged banter with Aizawa, also known as Shoto, expressing his happiness to see them both, albeit in a less-than-ideal location. Nizu reminded Izuku that he couldn't keep running from his past, as those from it were still searching for him. Izuku scoffed at this notion, acknowledging that while he couldn't run forever, he wished they would move on. He felt that he had never been family to them, and that had been made clear on that day. Aizawa, curious about the conversation, prompted Izuku to clarify. Izuku shifted the topic to more pressing matters, asking if they had a secure location to speak freely. Nizu suggested his office at UA. In Nizu's office, Izuku inquired whether only Nizu and Aizawa would know about the delicate matter at hand. Nizu explained that it involved the safety of his students and the public, emphasizing the need for confidentiality. Izuku smirked, acknowledging Nizu's perceptiveness but noting that Nizu likely didn't know the specifics. Aizawa, growing impatient, requested clarity on the subject. Nizu explained the lighthouse strategy, a unique but effective approach. Aizawa sought further explanation, and Izuku asked what one would notice about a lighthouse at night. Aizawa replied with, "the light," to which Nizu added that there was nothing else. Izuku confirmed this, explaining that in a lighthouse operation, the lead stands out while the rest remain hidden in the shadows. He quoted the saying, "It's always darkest at the base of the lighthouse." Aizawa grasped the concept, realizing it meant Izuku had a partner whose identity would remain secret unless Izuku was killed or missing in action. Izuku hoped they would never have to find out. He reassured them that his partner was skilled enough to gain entry on their own. Nizu mentioned that he would provide a recommendation for Izuku, which would help him stand out during the upcoming exam in 2 months. Aizawa noted that Izuku would be placed in his class and assured him he would treat him no differently from the other students. Izuku acknowledged this, jokingly calling Aizawa Dadzawa-sensei. He then expressed his determination to handle any challenges his way if things went south during his time at UA. He locked eyes with Aizawa to emphasize his resolve before announcing he needed to check out his new apartment. He waved goodbye as he left without waiting for a response. Nizu remarked that there was never a dull moment with Izuku around, sensing that they were in for a challenging year ahead. Izuku stood in awe as he surveyed the front parlor of Yayorus Manor, marveling at its grandeur. He pondered the cost of such a place, reflecting on his own financial situation. While he wasn't wealthy, he wasn't struggling either. He realized he had never spent much of his salary, preferring to avoid extravagant purchases. A sudden cough startled him, drawing his attention to the man standing beside Bruce. The man was about his height, perhaps an inch or two taller, with short, slicked-back black hair. He appeared surprisingly fit for someone in his mid-40s. Izuku extended his hand for a firm handshake, introducing himself. It was a pleasure to finally meet Mr. Yayorus, he thought. Cookie responded warmly, encouraging Izuku to call him Cookie or Dad, as he would soon be part of the family. He suggested they head to his study to chat before dinner, expressing a desire to learn more about Izuku beyond what was written in his file. He then playfully instructed Bruce to inform his wife and daughter that they would join them at the table, adding that Momo was eager to see Izuku again but should refrain from peeking. Izuku was puzzled by Cookie's comment about Momo, but he shrugged it off and agreed to follow Cookie into his study. Once seated, Cookie began the conversation by asking about Izuku's decision to join Parabellum. He noted that, while there were other young soldiers, Izuku's combat rank and completed missions were remarkable, even compared to seasoned veterans. Izuku explained that he had joined at the age of 10 after being rescued by his father, Commander Midoriya, during a raid on the compound where he had been held captive. Cookie expressed empathy, stating he would have done the same for his own daughter, Momo. Izuku felt a pang of discomfort, realizing Cookie was unaware of his adoption. Taking a deep breath, he continued, sharing that he didn't officially become his father's son until a year later when he was adopted. Cookie inquired about Izuku's biological parents, to which Izuku replied that it was a painful subject and preferred not to dwell on it. Cookie reassured him that he was more interested in the person Izuku had become rather than his lineage. He wanted to reward Izuku for his contributions to the world, acknowledging that Izuku had unknowingly done him a personal favor. When asked why he funded Parabellum, Cookie explained that heroes often had lines they wouldn't cross, while soldiers faced harsh realities and did what was necessary. Izuku appreciated Cookie's understanding and asked about the favor he had done. Cookie smiled cryptically, suggesting that Izuku would find out in due time. As they prepared to meet their wives, Izuku felt a rush of warmth to his cheeks, aware of the significance of the moment. Upon entering the dining hall, Cookie introduced his wife, Rina, to Izuku. Rina greeted him with a hug, which caught him off guard. She encouraged him to call her Rina or Mom, and just as he was processing this, Momo interjected, urging her mother to let him go, sensing his discomfort. Rina playfully teased Momo about her feelings, noting Izuku's handsomeness. Cookie then formally introduced Momo as Izuku's fiancée. Momo blushed as she greeted him, her radiant smile leaving Izuku momentarily speechless. He found her stunning, captivated by her striking features and warm, inviting eyes. As he admired her, thoughts raced through his mind about the upcoming marriage and whether she was truly okay with it. He worried about how she might react to his past and realized he had voiced his concerns aloud, causing him to cover his face in embarrassment. Cookie chuckled, having heard about Izuku's bluntness from Hisashi. He affirmed that Izuku was perfect for Momo, especially since he had considered her feelings. He assured Izuku that he would never force Momo into a marriage she wasn't comfortable with. Rina chimed in, expressing her approval of Izuku and suggesting they enjoy dinner before it got cold, knowing the two would have much to discuss afterward. After a somewhat awkward dinner filled with small talk, Izuku found himself gently ushered into the garden with Momo. The night had fallen, and the moonlight illuminated their surroundings. Momo hesitated before speaking, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? I want to get to know more about you." Izuku responded positively, encouraging Momo to ask anything she wanted. Momo mentioned that her father had told her Izuku's quirk was similar yet different from hers, and she sought clarification on that. Izuku explained that Momo's quirk, creation, allowed her to use the lipids in her body to create anything, as long as she understood its chemical makeup and it was non-living. He then shared that his quirk was called Realize, which also enabled him to create anything, but he utilized the matter around him to craft whatever he desired. To demonstrate, he activated his quirk and presented her with a white rose, causing her to blush and giggle. Momo complimented him on his smoothness and thanked him for the lovely gift. She inquired about the potential drawbacks of such a powerful quirk. Izuku acknowledged her intelligence, confirming that anything he crafted from the air was unstable and could dissolve over time or if he lost focus. However, he assured her that the rose was different, as he had crafted it with the right materials. As he lifted his foot to reveal a small hole underneath, he noted that it was getting late and he should be on his way. Momo, with a hint of disappointment, asked when he would be able to visit again. She understood he must be busy with missions but expressed her desire to see him once more. Izuku revealed that he was on a long-term mission and would be staying for a while, which brightened her mood. Excitedly, Momo proposed they go on a date the following weekend. Izuku agreed but requested she share the story of how they first met, not just the events of that night. Momo hesitated, surprised that he knew there was more to their history. Izuku explained that he had noticed clues throughout the evening, including hints dropped by her father. He also mentioned that she had shown him more affection than he had anticipated for a first meeting, which made her blush even more. Momo whispered that it was hard not to like him after he had rescued her, and she playfully declared she would share the details only after their date. They exchanged numbers as she walked him to the door. As Izuku turned to leave, he was unexpectedly spun around and felt Momo's warm lips against his. After a brief moment, she pulled away, teasing that after making her blush so much that evening, he had earned that small reward. With a cheerful goodnight, she hurried back into the manor. Izuku reflected on the encounter, thinking that maybe the situation wouldn't be so bad after all. Izuku had just finished unpacking his belongings and was contemplating dinner when the doorbell rang. He walked slowly toward the door, using his ability to craft a suppressed pistol in his left hand. As he opened the door, he kept his left side hidden while pressing the pistol against the thin wooden door. He aimed it at the well-dressed man standing before him and asked if he could help. The butler, with a respectful demeanor, apologized for disturbing Izuku's evening and assured him that he meant no harm, deeming the pistol unnecessary. Izuku smiled slightly before allowing the pistol to dissolve. He expressed his apologies, mentioning that it was a habit he had picked up, and complimented the butler for noticing. The butler humbly replied that he was unworthy of such praise, explaining that he had been informed by his master to expect some kind of weapon at the door. Izuku, piecing together the clues, noted that the butler knew his name, his address despite his recent move, and how he would react to a stranger at his door. He asked for confirmation of the butler's purpose. The butler's eyes widened slightly as he introduced himself as Bruce Wingate, the butler to the Yayorus family. He conveyed that his master, Cookie Yayorus, would like to invite Izuku to join him for dinner. Izuku, feeling a bit self-conscious, mumbled that he didn't have nice clothes for a formal dinner and mentioned that he was sweaty and hadn't showered. Bruce reassured him that there was no need to dress up, as Master Cookie disliked formality. He added that Izuku could take his time showering, as he would wait for him in the parking lot. Izuku noted Bruce's use of sama, realizing that he was already being treated like family, which was technically true. With a sigh of defeat, he agreed to be ready in about an hour and asked Bruce to call him by his first name. Bruce acknowledged this and walked downstairs toward the parking lot. Izuku closed the door and headed to the shower after laying out his nicest set of clothes. His upbringing in a secret branch of the military was evident in his sense of style. It had been a week since the dinner at the Yayorus manor, and Izuku had finally gotten used to life off base. He had to admit it was pretty relaxing, with no early morning shouting from drill sergeants stress-testing raw recruits. There were no roaring engines of planes taking off or landing at the airfield, and even the faint but distinct sounds of gunfire from the range were absent. This was the peace they fought so hard to maintain. Izuku had made a firm decision to protect this peace at all costs. His phone vibrated, and he saw a message from Momo, telling him where to meet and expressing her excitement to see him again. Over the week, they had grown much closer through texts and late-night calls. He learned a lot about her. She was intelligent, confident, and kind, although she tended to worry excessively. During one call, she had asked if he was truly okay with marrying her, given that he had been somewhat pressured into it. Not one to lie, he had been honest with her, saying that he had never really thought about dating, let alone marriage. However, he meant what he had blurted out that night. If it was with her, it might not be so bad. After that conversation, they grew closer but agreed to take things slow. The marriage could wait. His mission took priority. After calling his father for permission, he shared his undercover status at UA with Momo, though he kept the reasons for his presence there a secret. It would have been too difficult to hide it from her, especially since she would also be attending UA. She was thrilled to learn they would be going to UA together. After taking a shower and dressing casually, he headed toward their meeting place, a small seaside cafe. Upon arriving, he was greeted by Momo, who smiled at him. She playfully pouted, saying he was late. Izuku found her cute and responded with a quip about wizards, quoting a line from one of his favorite pre-Quirk-era movies. Momo giggled, unable to maintain her pout, and teased him about not being a wizard. He playfully insisted that he was, as he waved his hand through the air, creating a flurry of rose petals above him and striking a dramatic pose. Momo laughed, telling him to stop being so dramatic and making references, as she was gasping for air from laughter. He decided to ease up on the teasing for the moment. He smirked and explained that his stylish self was different from his dramatic self, which was a total diva. Momo rolled her eyes at his comment, and they took a seat. After placing their orders, they chatted about their likes and dislikes, her dream of being a hero, and some of the declassified missions he had undertaken. When their orders arrived, he was sipping his black coffee when she asked about his childhood. He hesitated but decided she deserved to know the truth. It was better for her to learn it now rather than later. He placed his cup back on the table and shared the story of his life, about being neglected and mistreated, being taken and forced to watch as his father, a hero, chose to save his sister and left him in the hands of a monster who had harmed him. He recounted how he had been locked up and isolated for 2 years as the monster tried to break his will, and how he was eventually saved by his adoptive father and joined Parabellum. As he spoke, he noticed Momo's expression shift through sadness, anger, and tears. When he finished, she jumped up, ran around the table, and pulled him into a tight hug while sobbing. He slowly hugged her back, stroking her head gently to calm her. She whispered, asking how he could be okay after everything that had happened. He admitted that he wasn't, that it still hurt, and he didn't think he could ever forgive them. He explained that he had been forced to grow up that day and realized that the world heroes protect is different from the one they actually live in. He believed that a true hero doesn't need to be seen or heard, they simply act to save lives and remove evil. After a few minutes, Momo calmed down enough to return to her seat. He asked her not to worry about his past and to keep it a secret. She then asked what he would do if he met them again. He replied that he would do absolutely nothing. Momo was stunned by his unexpected answer, so he explained that they didn't deserve anything from him and weren't worth his time. While he felt a burning hatred toward them, he believed they weren't worth the effort of plotting revenge. However, if they tried to interfere with his current life, he would take action. Momo froze at the coldness in his voice. He then shifted to a lighter tone, suggesting they talk about something else, specifically the time she met him. Momo, still flustered by the sudden change in mood, began to recount her story. She shared that 3 years ago, she had been kidnapped by a group of extremists who called themselves the Hands of God. During a mission later known as Operation Martyrdom, she had been rescued by the team's leader by him. 2 months had passed, and it was now exam day. These 2 months were mostly peaceful, with one peculiar request from Nizu a month ago. Normally, Izuku would refuse to help without knowing the reason, but Nizu promised he would owe him a favor. That was an offer Izuku couldn't refuse, and he smirked, knowing that having Nizu owe him a favor was worth its weight in gold. The task itself was straightforward. He just had to clean Takoba Beach. With the help of Realize, it only took a couple of days to turn all the junk back into its base materials. Nizu showed up to have all the materials hauled away, leaving Izuku curious about his plans. He hoped it wouldn't come back to haunt him later. During these 2 months, Izuku's first date with Momo had gone well, aside from the conversation about his past. The mystery of how she knew about him was finally solved. She was the girl he had saved that night. He had been so angry then that he lost sight of things, never really taking a good look at her. They continued to go on dates at least once a week, texting and calling each other daily. Izuku enjoyed spending time with her, though she remained focused on her goal of becoming a hero, dedicating much of her time to studying for the exam. Even though they were both recommended students, she still needed to take the exam. It was still a bit early, but Izuku decided to head to the exam site to meet Nizu. At the UA exam site, Nizu was feeling a bit overwhelmed. He had gotten too excited about another project and had overlooked a significant issue. Both Izuku and Toshinori would be in the same room. Additionally, Izuku's sister, Izumi, would be taking the regular exam. While it was entertaining to mess with Izuku, this was one big red button he preferred not to press. Nizu needed to find a way to control the situation before Izuku confronted Toshinori. Although Izuku couldn't match Toshinori's full strength, he could still hold his own at about 30%. Coupled with his quirk, intelligence, combat experience, and determination, Izuku could potentially achieve what most villains could only dream of: defeating All Might. Nizu decided to separate them for now until he could gauge Izuku's reaction to seeing Toshinori. He didn't think Izuku would attack him on sight, but Izuku was unpredictable. He planned to convince Izuku to watch the practical exam from the fake city instead of the observation room. Now, he needed to deal with Toshinori, hoping he wouldn't notice Izuku. It was best to have a backup plan, so he had his secretary call Toshinori to his office. Toshinori entered the office, announcing his arrival loudly. Nizu gestured for him to take a seat, explaining that he had something important to discuss. He advised Toshinori to power down to save his transformation time, hinting that he might need it later. Nizu informed Toshinori about Parabellum, the government's assassins, who did the dirty work and took no prisoners. Toshinori stiffened at the mention of their name, expressing his disdain for them and his desire to lock them all up if he could. Nizu reassured him that his opinions didn't matter in this case. He revealed that due to an increase in villain activity, Parabellum would send undercover agents to help protect the students. All hero schools had been assigned agents, and UA was no exception. They had received one of the best agents in Japan, an S-ranked soldier known as Arclight. Toshinori expressed his discontent but acknowledged that he couldn't stop the decision. He asked if the agent would be a teacher, to which Nizu replied that the agent was only 18 and would be treated as a student unless an incident occurred, in which case he would have full authority to act to protect the students. Nizu emphasized the importance of not approaching the agent, as he might pose a significant threat. Nizu warned Toshinori that the agent had a deep-seated hatred for him, a sentiment he would understand upon meeting the agent. With the exam time approaching, they headed to the site. Nizu sent a message to Izuku, instructing him to watch from the fake city, hinting that he might see something interesting. On a rooftop in the fake city, Izuku observed the door that would signal the start of the exams. Nizu's excuse had piqued his interest, but he sensed there was more to it. He decided to put those thoughts aside for now and focus on the future heroes below. As the door opened, a giant green moss ball shot forward, immediately destroying several robots. Impressive, Izuku thought. The candidate had jumped straight into combat without hesitation, a commendable trait for a hero. Suddenly, the city was flooded with examinees, each showcasing their unique quirks. 4 candidates caught Izuku's attention: a blonde with a laser from his navel, a blue-haired robot with engines in his legs, a brown-haired girl making objects float, and the moss ball from earlier, who seemed to possess a telekinesis quirk. As he watched, the entire building began to shake. A massive robot rose from the ground, causing the examinees to scatter in panic. Izuku wondered how Nizu could afford such a creation when it dawned on him that this was what Nizu had used all the materials from the beach. For this robot likely marked the end of the exam for most of these candidates. Suddenly, the robot slowed down, and Izuku glanced down at its feet, noticing the moss ball struggling to hold it in place with her quirk. Next to the moss ball was a girl who appeared to be trapped. Izuku sighed, hoping Nizu understood why he had destroyed his toy. He jumped from the roof towards the robot's head, activating Warlord at 10% and swinging his fist. As his fist made contact, the robot fell backward, away from the moss ball and the girl. Just as he planned, but now he was falling toward the children he had saved. He could take the hit, but he preferred to avoid the pain. Instead, he decided to use Realize and crafted a simple parachute that slowed his descent enough to prevent injury. Landing next to the girl, he noticed that her leg was trapped under rubble. Lifting the debris off her, he asked if she was okay. She replied that she thought she had sprained her ankle but was grateful for their help. Medical staff soon arrived to take her away. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him that sent chills down his spine. It was a voice he hadn't heard in over 10 years, one he could never forget. As he thought about it, he felt his blood begin to boil with rage. He turned to face the source of the voice, and there stood Izumi Yagi, a face he hoped never to see again, filled with tears. Izumi reached out toward him, asking where he had been and why he hadn't come home. It was as if she feared he would disappear again if she didn't grab him. He took a step back, insisting that he was not her brother. Closing his eyes, he dropped a flash grenade. Once it went off, he jumped away and dashed home before she could recover. In the observation room overlooking the fake city testing site, various pro heroes and 2 recommended students were watching the exam. Vlad King commented on the impressive batch of students this year, particularly noting the green-haired girl, Izumi Yagi. Aizawa expressed his desire to have her in his class, to which Nizu agreed, stating that she would be placed in Aizawa's care. All Might spoke about how hard Izumi had trained to become a hero, driven by the desire to save someone. Vlad King asked how All Might knew this, and All Might revealed that she was his daughter and that the person she wanted to save was his son, who had gone missing 10 years ago. Vlad King was surprised at how long it had been and questioned if All Might was still searching. All Might affirmed that he was still looking, having sworn never to give up again. Meanwhile, Momo and Nizu exchanged glances, thinking that the person All Might sought was right in front of him. Aizawa inquired about the problem child, wondering where he was. Nizu explained that he was in the fake city, wanting to see the exam up close. Momo noted that this didn't sound like Izuku, prompting All Might to ask about him. Nizu, realizing he needed a distraction, pulled out a big red button and pressed it, laughing maniacally. Everyone was curious about what the button did, and Nizu announced that it released the zero-pointer. They all turned to watch as the zero-pointer began rampaging through the fake city. Horror filled the room as it appeared ready to crush 2 examinees. Before anyone could react, they saw the zero-pointer get destroyed and watched as the young man who had done it floated down. Vlad King zoomed in on Izuku, questioning who he was, while Aizawa confirmed that he was the problem child he had mentioned earlier. Nizu introduced Izuku Midoriya as their 3rd recommended student, and All Might simply whispered his name in disbelief. I stood there frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what I had just witnessed. My son, who had been missing for the last 10 years, was here at UA. My son, who had been quirkless, now possessed a powerful quirk. Using it, he had defeated the zero-pointer, saving 2 people, one of whom was Izumi. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished in a flash. The flash jolted me back to reality, and I turned toward the door, ready to rush out in search of Izuku. However, I was halted by a tugging on my costume. I turned to see Nizu, shaking his head. Nizu insisted that I follow him to his office, stating that we needed to talk. Despite my protests, he maintained his stance with an unusually cold tone that I had never heard from him before. Once we were seated in his office, Nizu began to explain. He acknowledged my confusion and the whirlwind of emotions I was experiencing. He warned me that if I tried to approach Izuku right now, it could end badly. Izuku was no longer the child I had known. I expressed my desperation, insisting that I needed to see my son and take him home. Nizu sighed, clearly frustrated, and revealed that Izuku had become Arclight. The weight of his words hit me hard. I struggled to process the implications. I asked how long he had been with them and why he would threaten me, his father. Nizu informed me that Izuku had been rescued 8 years ago during a raid on a villain hideout. He had not been in good condition, with severe injuries and scars. During his recovery, it was discovered that he had been misdiagnosed as quirkless. His quirk had been dormant until the trauma he experienced activated it. When they learned his identity, they attempted to convince him to return, but he refused, claiming that Izuku Yagi had died 2 years ago and asking to join them instead. Nizu explained that he had trained under Commander Hisashi Midoriya, who had adopted him. During his early missions, he had been ruthless. Fearing that Izuku might go rogue, Hisashi had asked Nizu to study him. Through their conversations, Nizu learned of Izuku's resilience, which was nothing short of miraculous. Nizu candidly told me that I had made significant mistakes. Izuku harbored deep resentment toward me, and Nizu was unsure if he would be able to control his anger. He elaborated on the pain Izuku had endured as a child, wanting nothing more than to be a hero but feeling abandoned by his parents. The final blow had been when I chose my daughter over him once again. I was overwhelmed by the realization of what Izuku had suffered and understood the depth of his hatred toward me. Despite knowing that my past actions could never be forgiven, I felt compelled to try to earn his forgiveness, even if it meant risking my life. I resolved that I could not ignore my son any longer. I was determined to reach out to him, no matter the cost. Nizu acknowledged my determination but advised me to take it. He warned me not to pressure Izuku or force him to come home and, most importantly, to avoid getting in his way. Upon arriving home, I was met with a flood of tears from my wife, Inko. She asked if it was true that Izumi had seen Izuku at the exam. I confirmed that it was indeed him after all these years. Inko's excitement quickly turned to concern as she asked where he was and when he would be coming home. I had to break the news that he would not be living with us. Both Inko and Izumi were taken aback by my revelation. I urged them to sit down as I explained everything I knew about Izuku's life since he had been taken. I reassured them that while he might not trust us right away, I would not give up on him. I would not abandon him again. Izumi asked when we would see him again, and I smiled slightly, reminding them that he would be a student at UA. 2 weeks passed, and I found myself in a different situation. Momo had shown up at my apartment that morning and half-dragged me into her limo. She had learned enough about me over the past few months to know that I was contemplating leaving. I was still upset from my encounter with my sister, and I knew that All Might would be teaching the heroics classes. Nizu had informed him of my status and warned him not to interfere with me outside of class. I decided to focus on my mission and my relationship with Momo. I thanked her for her support, indicating that I was feeling better, and asked her to stop petting me. Momo playfully insisted that I was hers until we reached class. She then asked if I would be comfortable telling others about our relationship, given that our situation was unique. I assured her that I was okay with it, as I had reached a point where I would have asked her out myself. As I wrapped my arms around her waist and pulled her in for a kiss, a thin silver line connected our lips, and I noticed her face turning beet red as I pulled away. Letting go of her waist, he opened the door as the limo rolled to a stop. He took her hand and helped her out. Aizawa announced that this would be their home for the next 3 years and instructed everyone to pick a floor and a room. The boys' rooms were on the right, and the girls' rooms were on the left. Each room was the same, equipped with its own shower. He told them to settle in and do whatever they wanted, as long as they didn't damage the rooms. He emphasized that they weren't kids and he wasn't a babysitter, acknowledging that they would likely do what they wanted with each other. Aizawa advised them to use protection and avoid causing drama. He laid down some basic rules: not to bother him, to keep the common area and kitchen clean, to return to the dorms by 9 p.m., and to refrain from fighting in the dorms. After stating that he had better things to do, he transformed into his sleeping bag form and rolled away. The group exchanged glances and began heading to the dorms when Pinky suggested they meet in the common area after unpacking to introduce themselves, as they would be living together for the next 3 years. Bakugu dismissed the idea, stating he had no time for them and stormed off. Manly Ginger expressed confusion about Bakugu's attitude, while Izuku shrugged it off, claiming Bakugu was just angry by nature. He then declared his choice for the room farthest from the stairs on the top floor, and Momo quickly agreed. Manly Ginger claimed the room next to Izuku's, and the sacred rule of dibs was respected as everyone dispersed to settle into their new rooms. In his room, Izuku stepped back to admire his work. At first glance, it appeared simple: a double bed with black covers, a work desk in one corner, and a decent gaming rig in another. A bean-bag chair sat beside the bed. However, the modifications he had made were discreet. The walls were painted a special OD green that absorbed radio waves and vibrations, rendering the room soundproof. The work desk had a hidden compartment containing his laptop for missions, and a concealed suppressed M9 was tucked away in the headrest of his bed for quick access if necessary. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Expecting it to be Momo needing help, he opened the door to find Izumi standing there. He sighed, trying to keep his anger in check. She asked if they could talk, her voice trembling. Despite his feelings toward her, he felt a pang of guilt and allowed her to enter, closing the door behind her. He sat on the bed while she took a seat in the beanbag chair. Before she could begin, he reminded her of his feelings, stating that he hated her and her family but was allowing her to speak because they would be together for the next 3 years. Izumi expressed her remorse, acknowledging that her actions were unforgivable and that she was not seeking forgiveness. She explained that she had listened to Bakugu's misguided plan, believing it would protect Izuku from harm. Izuku raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her mention of a plan. She recounted a nightmare in which he became the first quirkless hero and was brutally defeated by a villain while she was forced to watch. Terrified by the dream, she had sought Bakugu's help, who suggested that if Izuku were beaten, he would abandon his dream of being a hero. Izumi lamented her foolishness, realizing that everything Izuku had suffered was a result of her actions. Izuku stood there, conflicted. He had learned to read emotions during his time with Parabellum, and Izumi appeared genuinely remorseful and angry at herself. He told her he wouldn't pry into her knowledge of his past but questioned why she was ignoring Bakugu if they were friends. Izumi revealed that they had stopped being friends after he had gone missing, as Bakugu had shown indifference to her concerns. She realized then that he was not a good person and distanced herself from him. Izuku acknowledged that she had made a wise choice in removing Bakugu from her life. While he was unsure if he could forgive her, he considered that perhaps she wasn't as bad as he had thought. He stood up and opened the door, suggesting they head to the common area, where everyone else should be by now. As they walked down the stairs into the common area, they found that everyone had already gathered. Izuku noticed an empty spot next to Momo on the couch and sat down beside her, oblivious to the curious glances directed at him. Momo sensed that something had transpired between him and Izumi, especially since he entered calmly rather than in anger. She tugged on his sleeve to get his attention, and when he turned to her, he looked into her eyes. I signed and nodded in agreement, understanding what she wanted. Standing up, Momo settled herself in my lap. Once comfortable, she wrapped her arm around my neck and called out to Izumi. Momo invited Yagi to join us, and I smiled at her actions, thinking about how she wanted to share our connection. Izumi appeared surprised but took a seat next to us. Mina cheerfully introduced herself, excitedly pointing at us. She declared her name was Mina Ishido, her quirk was acid, and she enjoyed dancing. Kirishima followed, stating his name was Eijiro Kirishima, his quirk was hardening, and he liked manly activities and working out. Hagakure chimed in next, introducing herself as Toru Hagakure, with the quirk of invisibility and a fondness for shopping. Koda introduced himself as Koji Koda, mentioning his quirk was Ani voice and his love for animals. Sato shared his name, Rikido Sato, his quirk was Sugar Rush, and he enjoyed baking. Mineta introduced himself as Minor Mineta, with the quirk Pop-Off and a particular admiration for the ladies. Uraraka greeted everyone, saying she was Ochako Uraraka, her quirk was Zero Gravity, and she liked Machi. Jiro introduced herself as Kyoka Jiro, with the quirk Earphone Jacks and a passion for music. Shoji stated his name was Mizo Shoji, his quirk was Dupli Arms, and he didn't have any specific likes or dislikes. Shoto simply introduced himself as Shoto Todoroki, half cold and half hot, before getting up and leaving. Siro remarked on the oddness of the situation before introducing himself as Hanta-Siro, with the quirk Tape, and a love for hanging out and having fun. Tokoyami introduced himself as Fumikage Tokoyami, with the quirk Dark Shadow, stating that darkness was his friend. Ojiro shared his name as Mashireo Ojiro, his quirk was Tail, and he enjoyed martial arts. Azui introduced herself as Tsuyu Azui, asking to be called Tsu, and shared her quirk was Frog. Aoyama introduced himself as Yuga Aoyama, with the quirk Naval Laser, and mentioned he couldn't stop twinkling. Ida introduced himself as Tenya Ida, with the quirk Engine, and expressed his fondness for rules and studying. Izumi introduced herself as Izumi Yagi, with the quirk Telekinesis, and mentioned her love for her family and studying quirks. Kaminari introduced himself as Denki Kaminari, with the quirk Electrification, and said he liked hanging out. Momo introduced herself as Momo Yayoru, with the quirk Creation, and shared her interests in playing piano, reading, and her fiancé, Izuku midoriya. Everyone else reacted in shock at this revelation. Izuku, feeling the need to clarify, stated that he was indeed Momo's fiancé, Izuku midoriya, with the quirk Realize. He expressed his interests in studying quirks, reading, gaming, and, of course, his fiancée Momo. Chaos erupted following the revelation of our relationship. Mina led the charge with a flurry of questions, eagerly asking Momo for details about our connection. Meanwhile, I felt irritation rising as a couple of classmates asked similar questions, their enthusiasm bordering on excessive. Rather than endure the commotion any longer, I activated Warlord and swiftly left the scene, Momo still in my arms. Flashback 3 years ago, in an undisclosed location, Izuku was leading a team. He instructed his teammates to prepare for their mission, emphasizing the importance of stealth and communication. He assigned roles, ensuring that they would breach the compound walls on his command. After a few days, things had finally calmed down at UA. Momo was no longer being bombarded with questions from the other girls, and Izuku was free from the constant attention of the boys after his recent experiment. Tired of the inquiries about their nightlife, he devised a plan. He first approached Mineta, asking about his quirk and suggesting a challenge involving his sticky ball. With Mineta's help, he managed to cover the hallway ceiling in no time. Next, he enlisted Siro and Denki, convincing them that they could bulk up quickly by tying themselves up and flexing. Once they were wrapped in tape, Izuku lifted them and tossed them onto Mineta's sticky creations. Siro, always supportive, provided more tape to cover their mouths, ensuring they remained hidden until the next day. Aside from this small incident, Izuku got along well with his classmates, even the more mischievous ones. The only exceptions were Bakugu and Izumi. While he still held some resentment towards Izumi, he no longer hated her as much. However, being around her remained uncomfortable. Bakugu, on the other hand, continued to show his aggressive nature, even making it difficult for Kirishima, who was known for his friendly demeanor. Izuku was concerned about Bakugu's growing ego and obsession with power, realizing that if it continued, he might have to take action. The bell rang, signaling the start of the first heroics class of the school year, and Izuku felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety, knowing that All Might would be teaching that day. As the students speculated about their instructor, All Might made a grand entrance, announcing the start of battle training. He emphasized the importance of looking the part of a hero, prompting excitement among most of the class, while Izuku maintained a more reserved demeanor. In the changing room, Kirishima noticed Izuku's scars and expressed concern. Izuku downplayed the situation, attributing his scars to a fall, but Kirishima offered his support if Izuku ever wanted to talk. They shifted the conversation to fitness, with Kirishima expressing admiration for Izuku's physique and agreeing to join him for morning workouts. As time was running short, Izuku began changing when he spotted Mineta by the wall. Curious about his antics, he approached him. Mineta was looking for a way to spy on the girls, but Izuku quickly used his quirk to patch a hole in the wall before Mineta could find it. Seizing the opportunity to tease him, Izuku raised his voice, pretending to offer support to Mineta, suggesting he didn't need to pretend to like girls. The other boys caught on, whispering among themselves, and Mineta was left confused. Izuku then suggested that Mineta should confess his feelings to Denki, who reacted with shock. As the other boys left, giving Mineta thumbs up, Denki fled the scene, with Mineta chasing after him, insisting it wasn't true. Izuku chuckled to himself, pleased with the outcome. When they arrived at Ground Gamma, All Might greeted the class enthusiastically, checking attendance. Flustered from the earlier events, noted that Izuku was late. He finally arrived, apologizing for his delay in getting dressed. Kirishima praised Izuku's costume, while the others found it both impressive and intimidating. Izuku then turned to Momo, suggesting they discuss her hero costume later in private, causing her face to flush with embarrassment. He reassured her that he understood the reasoning behind her design and believed he could help improve it. As the next match began, Izuku approached the control panel and discreetly removed the jammer, crushing it in his hand. Only one person noticed, and he nodded at them. They would report to Parabellum and investigate Bakugu's recent actions, looking for connections to known villains or villain groups. Bakugu had become a marked individual. His use of excessive force could not be overlooked. If it were up to Izuku, he would have dealt with him immediately. However, Bakugu had only suffered a few broken bones, a consequence of being a student. Izuku's orders were to protect the students, not harm them. It was a hassle, but he understood the necessity of following orders. If nothing significant arose during the investigation and Bakugu learned from this experience, he might still have a chance to redeem himself. The responsibility now rested on Bakugu's shoulders. Izuku knew he would have to report this to Nizu, who had likely noticed the jamming signals. He anticipated being summoned after class. Ojiro approached Izuku, expressing curiosity about his fighting skills. He remarked on Izuku's flawless movements and perfect timing. Mina chimed in, asking about the glow in his eyes, wondering if it was part of his quirk. Izuku explained that he had learned to fight from his father, Hizashi Midoriya, a martial arts instructor who trained VIPs for the government. He smirked, feeling he had not lied to his new friends. When Mina pressed for clarification about his abilities, he explained that his quirk was called Realize, while his ability was referred to as Warlord. Mina looked puzzled, tilting her head in confusion. Izumi then asked if he was implying he had two quirks, a notion considered impossible. The room fell silent, and Izuku felt the weight of their gazes, particularly one that radiated fear, which only fueled his frustration. He clarified that he did not possess a second quirk. His warlord ability was simply what a regular person could achieve by removing the body's limiters. He elaborated that he used his quirk, Realize, to modify his body to produce adrenaline on command, effectively allowing him to bypass his physical limitations. He then redirected their attention to the match, encouraging them to watch. Later, after classes had concluded, Izuku found himself in Nizu's office, feeling a surge of anger upon seeing All Might present. Nizu informed him that he needed to give a report about the day's events, explaining that All Might was there due to the situation's importance. Izuku felt trapped but complied, standing at ease as he began his report. He detailed the events of the battle training, stating that he, Captain Izuku Midoriya, callsign Arclight, had engaged in less-than-lethal combat with Katsuki Baku. He noted that Bakugu had used excessive force that could have been lethal to anyone else. Izuku deemed it necessary to incapacitate Bakugu, as he posed a danger to the other students. To keep them uninformed until a decision was made regarding Bakugu's actions, he jammed the signal to the control room. Nizu acknowledged the severity of Bakugu's injuries, noting the multiple fractures he had sustained. He asked if Izuku had anything else to add. Izuku stated that Bakugu had been marked for investigation due to his attempt to harm a classmate, and he expressed that he regretted nothing. Nizu decided that Bakugu would face extra lessons and dorm duty for the time being, acknowledging that Izuku had already taught him a painful lesson. He mentioned that if anything arose during Parabellum's investigation, he would hand Bakugu over to Izuku directly. Izuku expressed his gratitude for Nizu's understanding and attempted to leave, but Nizu stopped him, insisting he listen to All Might regarding a major threat. Reluctantly, Izuku agreed to hear what All Might had to say, but only concerning the threat at hand. He observed All Might's shame and sadness, recognizing his regret for past actions. All Might broached the topic of the man who had taken Izuku, prompting Izuku to scoff as he recalled the traumatic experience of losing his left eye and the years of torture he endured. All Might then revealed his desire for Izuku to inherit his quirk, One for All, as his own transformation time was diminishing and the power was needed to combat All for One. Izuku listened, feeling the weight of All Might's words. He expressed his refusal to accept the quirk, stating that he resented the connection to All Might's DNA. He burned the strand of hair All Might offered, asserting that gaining his quirk would not change the past. He declared that he had his own power and was not the worthless child All Might had discarded. I might not have understood what AFO meant that night, but I learned. Izumi was just a kid who didn't know better, even if I still felt resentment toward her. With that thought, I stormed off toward the dorms. Chapter End. Izuku entered the dorms, still fuming about All Might's offer. The very idea made his blood boil. How could he suddenly be deemed worthy of being All Might's successor just because he had a powerful quirk? It felt utterly absurd. He walked into the kitchen to grab a drink from the fridge, not paying attention to anyone around him. He was in no mood to talk, so he failed to notice a pair of onyx eyes observing him intently. After grabbing a bottle of water, he headed toward his room. Before he could reach his door, Momo caught him and pulled him into her room. She tossed him onto a bean-bag chair similar to the one in his own room and sat on him, pinning him down. Momo asked what was wrong and insisted he not give her his usual evasive answers. She hadn't seen him this angry before. Looking into her eyes, he sighed, realizing he couldn't keep this from her. He explained that he had spoken to All Might more like he had been compelled to and apologized for not being able to share all the details. It was related to his current mission, and he hoped she would understand. Momo accepted this, saying it couldn't be helped if it was about that. She urged him to tell her what he could. In moments like these, he realized just how much he cared for her. He revealed that the conversation had been about the man who had taken him 10 years ago. He had learned that this man was a much greater threat than he had realized. There was a way to increase his chances of defeating him, but it required taking something from All Might. He had refused, wanting nothing to do with him. As he began to feel anger rising again, Momo flicked his forehead. He rubbed the spot, surprised by the sting. He asked her why she had done that. Momo pressed him to answer why he had joined Parabellum. Confused by her sudden change of topic, he replied that he had joined to truly help people and eradicate evil at its roots. She then asked if he would do everything in his power to save people, to which he affirmed. Then she challenged him, questioning why he wasn't doing everything he could. He didn't understand her point. Momo expressed her frustration, pointing out that he was letting his personal feelings cloud his judgment. If taking whatever All Might offered could make it easier to help people, he should just take it. It shouldn't matter where it came from if it helped him fulfill his mission. Izuku was taken aback. She was right. His hatred for All Might had clouded his judgment. He needed to focus on the real threat, AFO. He knew firsthand what AFO was capable of. Pulling out his phone, he sent a message to Nizu. Izuku texted Nizu, informing him that he accepted All Might's offer but that it changed nothing between them. Nizu responded, curious about the sudden change of heart. He joked that it must have been his lovely wife who influenced him. Izuku retorted, telling Nizu to be quiet and questioning how he could still be so annoying through text. He added that he wouldn't take the offer for a few days. Nizu asked why, and Izuku explained he needed time to process the idea of what he had to do. Momo then asked if he was done. He thanked her, acknowledging she had been right and that he had been foolish. She grinned mischievously, saying that since he owed her, she had something for him to do. He readily agreed, saying he would do anything for her. Momo then requested that he sing. He immediately declined, but when she looked at him with teary eyes while pouting, he knew he couldn't refuse her forever. He stood up, setting her back down on the beanbag, and used his quirk to create a guitar. He told her he would sing just one song, and she nodded excitedly. Izuku let the guitar fade away and bowed towards Momo as if he had just finished a performance. Momo, grinning widely, approached him and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him in for a quick kiss. After letting go, she still wore that grin, which puzzled him. He asked her what was making her smile so much. Momo reminded him of their first day of school, when she had promised to get back at him for teasing her. She pointed towards the door, and as Izuku followed her finger, he froze at the sight. Class 1A was chanting for one more performance. In that moment, Izuku felt as if he were in a personal hell. The shame of being caught singing burned within him, and the embarrassment was a suffering he felt he would endure forever. It didn't help that two of his classmates were determined to torment him further. Mina urged him to sing, while Toru encouraged him to perform. Izuku insisted that he didn't remember singing at all, claiming it must have been a dream. He decided to stick to his denial. Mina then turned to Momo, asking her to make Izuku sing. He shot Momo a look that promised retribution for her involvement. Momo, however, giggled and said she loved hearing him sing but preferred not to provoke him at that moment. Before he could respond, Aizawa-sensei entered the classroom, looking as if he had just woken up. He instructed the students to sit down and announced that they would need to choose class representatives, emphasizing the importance of the decision for their futures as heroes. He didn't care how they made their choice, as long as it was done quietly. With that, Aizawa returned to his usual position behind his desk. Izuku had no interest in being a class representative and watched as his classmates eagerly volunteered. He noticed that only 3 students, including himself, remained silent: Shoto Todoroki, the resident loner, and Katsuki Bakugu, who had become surprisingly docile since his recovery. Despite their history, Izuku didn't want to remove Bakugu from consideration. If he could just set aside his ego, he could be a tremendous asset. Izuku recalled their training match, where he had managed to gain the upper hand due to Bakugu's inexperience. He still held a trump card that had earned him his S-rank combat ranking, but he felt no need to use it against a fellow student. His thoughts were interrupted when Momo slid a piece of paper in front of him. She explained that they were voting for class representatives, and the rules stated that no one could vote for themselves. The student with the most votes would become president, while the second highest would be vice president. Izuku nodded, took the paper, and cast his vote before placing it in the box. His mind wandered back to a coded message he had received that morning, which hinted at small-time thugs disappearing and being gathered by someone. Suddenly, Momo pulled him from his chair and dragged him to the front of the class, insisting that he needed to give a speech. He glanced at the board and saw that he had received the most votes, followed closely by Momo. With no real reason to refuse, he decided to go along with it. He expressed his surprise at being voted in and promised to do his best not to let his classmates down. Afterward, during lunch, Izuku sat down with Momo and their friends, enjoying a bowl of katsudon. He asked who had voted for him and why. Momo, Ijiro, Mina, Ochako, and even Tenya raised their hands in response. Momo remarked that she was surprised he thought he wouldn't be voted in. Mina added that Izuku was friendly and smart, while Ijiro noted that he always went out of his way to help others, referencing the time he assisted Denki with math work. Izuku laughed, acknowledging that helping Denki had been more challenging than herding cats. Just then, an alarm rang out, causing panic among the students. He quickly grabbed a nearby third-year student to ask what was happening. The student explained that it was a level 3 security breach, indicating a villain attack. Izuku was skeptical. UA was too secure for a full-scale assault. He hadn't heard any fighting or seen any teachers evacuating students. Looking out the window, he spotted Aizawa-sensei trying to manage a crowd of reporters. Realizing that was the cause of the alarm, he knew he had to restore order. Crafting a megaphone, he raised it to his lips and shouted for everyone to calm down, reminding them that it was just the press and that they couldn't let an alarm send them into a panic. His commanding voice helped settle the chaos, and Tenya remarked that his calm demeanor was why he had voted for him. Later, after the incident during lunch, Aizawa-sensei had the class change into their hero costumes and board a bus to the unforeseen simulation joint for rescue training. There was a minor incident involving their blue-haired classmate and the bus seats, but the bus ultimately prevailed. Izuku chose a seat at the back of the bus next to a window, where he could observe everyone. Momo sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder as she drifted off to sleep. He gently brushed her hair aside and stroked her cheek, feeling a surge of affection. He reflected on how much he loved her, realizing that their relationship, which had started off strangely, had become an essential part of his life. She filled the gaps he hadn't even known existed. She would calm him when he was angry. She would comfort him when he was sad, and most importantly, she wasn't afraid of him. She knew who he really was and what he had done, yet she still chose to give him her love. He honestly feared what would happen if his friends learned about his true identity. He was afraid they would come to hate him because of his willingness to fight. Tsu wondered why he and Yagi looked so much alike. Izumi, who was sitting next to Tsu, visibly tensed at the question. He glanced down at Momo, who was snuggling into his shoulder, and smiled. While she wasn't the best sister, she wasn't responsible for his being taken. Though her words could be harsh, she never used her quirk on him. That had been Bakugu. He would have never noticed if Momo hadn't calmed him down enough to think about it. Izumi's eyes widened, threatening to release the flood of emotions their bloodline was known for. Before anyone could ask any questions, the bus stopped, having arrived at USJ. After exiting the bus, they were met by Pro Hero 13, which sent Ochako and Izumi into a fangirl mode. After answering a few questions from the girls, Aizawa asked where All Might was. While 13 offered an excuse about him being in a meeting, he noticed the 3 fingers raised. 3 hours, huh? All Might had already used up his transformation time. He sighed, not wanting to get angry, and decided to focus on the training. He listened intently to 13's speech about how quirks, if used wrongly or carelessly, could be dangerous. She wasn't wrong, just look at him and Momo. Their quirks had similar traits, but he used his to fight while Momo used hers to help. It seemed like everyone was excited to start when Denki exclaimed about the fake villains. He looked toward where Denki was pointing and saw purple mist forming a circle. Through the mist, figures emerged. Aizawa shouted that those weren't fake, they were real villains. He instructed 13 to protect the students and called for Arclight to spring into action. He walked forward, crafting an M4 assault rifle, and stood next to Aizawa, much to the confusion of his classmates. Ijiro asked what he was doing, voicing the question everyone had on their minds. Arclight responded that he would explain everything later and instructed Ida to run to UA and get help, urging him to go now. With that, he focused on the villains in front of him. Tamura was frustrated, demanding to know where All Might was and accusing Kurogiri of hiding information. Kurogiri suggested that the 2 nearby might have answers. Tamura shouted at them, expressing his intent to confront All Might. The response was sharp, questioning why they would reveal such information, especially when the target was absent. Tamura insulted them, dismissing them as insignificant. Aizawa, concerned, whispered to the protagonist about provoking Tamura, noting the potential danger of the villain's teleportation abilities. The protagonist explained that by irritating Tamura, it could buy time for others to escape. Tamura, enraged, ordered his minions to attack first. The protagonist quickly distanced themselves from Aizawa to avoid interference. Once separated, they engaged in battle, swiftly taking down the closest villain with precise shots. The remaining villains hesitated, shocked by the sudden loss of their comrade. Seizing the moment, the protagonist continued their assault, eliminating more foes with rapid fire until their ammunition was exhausted. They discarded the weapon and conjured a flashbang and a katana. After throwing the flashbang into the crowd, they activated their special ability and charged in, skillfully dispatching enemies with their blade. When the katana got stuck, the protagonist crafted 2 pistols, using them to finish off the remaining villains. After running out of bullets, they let the pistols dissolve and created another rifle. They noticed Aizawa struggling against Tamura's ally, HNDJB, whose quirk was causing Aizawa's arm to decay. Without hesitation, the protagonist shot at HNDJB, causing him to cry out in pain. Tamura was incredulous that the protagonist was still standing. The protagonist retorted defiantly and fired again, but a monstrous creature intervened, blocking the shot. Tamura revealed that the creature, Nomu, was designed to defeat All Might. The protagonist questioned Tamura's foolishness in revealing such information. Tamura commanded Nomu to attack the protagonist first, but the protagonist's attention shifted to Izumi, who was in danger. Using their ability to intercept, they launched a powerful attack that sent Nomu flying. They urged Izumi to grab Aizawa and escape, insisting they could not protect both of them. Izumi was concerned about the protagonist's injuries, but the protagonist reassured her, insisting she needed to leave with Aizawa. As she pulled Aizawa away with her quirk, the protagonist taunted H&DJB, only to be violently thrown back by Nomu. Struggling to recover, the protagonist realized they had sustained serious injuries. Tamura mocked them, revealing that Nomu had shock absorption capabilities. Ignoring the pain, the protagonist charged at Nomu, crafting a scythe and using it to strike at the creature's leg. They then used the severed limb to heal themselves, but the exhaustion was evident. Tamura smugly mentioned Nomu's hyper-regeneration, which only fueled the protagonist's determination. They devised a plan, manipulating the environment to create a fiery trap that engulfed Nomu, ultimately defeating it. Tamura accused the protagonist of cheating, but Kurogyari insisted it was time to retreat as the pro-heroes arrived. They vanished through a portal, leaving the protagonist to collapse as their strength waned. As darkness closed in, they realized the toll of their abilities and the urgency of the situation. Hagakure expressed her concern about the situation, pointing towards Aizawa and Izuku, who were still engaged in battle against the villains. Everyone turned to see their teacher and friend fighting fiercely. Without hesitation, one student sprinted towards them, determined to help. Upon arrival, they froze at the sight of Izuku, who was skillfully navigating through the chaos, leaving a trail of defeated villains behind him. Izuku, in the midst of the fight, suddenly appeared before the student, urging them to grab Aizawa and escape. He was visibly injured, with marks around his eyes, but insisted he was fine and needed them to leave for their safety. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the student reluctantly agreed to return with help. After quickly securing Aizawa on their back, they dashed towards the entrance. Once there, they set Aizawa down, and Momo quickly began administering first aid. Concern for Izuku filled the air, and Momo asked about his whereabouts. The student explained that he had stayed behind to confront a powerful villain, tears beginning to fall. Kirishima reacted strongly, expressing disbelief that they had left Izuku to fight alone. Momo attempted to calm him, emphasizing that Izuku had sent them back to ensure Aizawa's safety. The reality of their perilous situation began to sink in, and fear for their friend grew among the group. Mineta, surprising everyone with his bravery, suggested they go help Izuku. He acknowledged his flaws but emphasized that Izuku had always been there for him and believed in him. His words sparked a shift in the group's mindset, shaking off the fear that had settled in. Denki supported Mineta's idea, and Kirishima rallied everyone to take action. Momo reminded them that they needed to split into two groups, with some staying behind to protect Aizawa and others going to assist Izuku. As they prepared to leave, one student noticed that the captured villain had vanished, prompting Momo to organize the groups quickly. With determination, they sprinted towards the battle. As they neared the fight, Izuku stumbled out, visibly exhausted. The student caught him with their quirk before he could fall, and Momo began tending to his injuries, which were severe but not life-threatening. Upon reaching the entrance, All Might arrived, ready to assist. The student urgently informed him that they needed to get Izuku to a hospital. Without hesitation, All Might lifted Izuku and leaped away towards Yue. Suddenly, an unknown figure dressed in black appeared, causing the group to prepare for a confrontation. The stranger raised his hands in a gesture of peace, introducing himself as Nightshade, a former ally of Izuku. He explained the need to clear the area and offered to escort the students back to their dorms for safety. Once at the dorms, Nightshade gathered everyone and prepared to address them, emphasizing that they had an important choice to make. Well, all except Miss Yayorus. He gestured toward her, indicating that she was already informed, so the others could leave if they wished. However, she decided to stay, believing it would be better to explain things about Izuku if needed. Nightshade expressed his gratitude, acknowledging her as perfect for Izuku, regardless of what lay ahead. He then turned serious, addressing the group. He reminded them that they had a choice to make and urged them to listen carefully before responding. He noted that they had witnessed Izuku Midoriya stepping up to fight for them. He posed a question about wanting to know who Izuku was and why he had been allowed to fight. However, he warned them that simply knowing his true identity would place them on a government watch list. If they chose to learn more, there would be no turning back. With that, he left the room to give them time to think. Shoji reflected on the weight of the situation, surprised that they could be added to a watch list just for learning more about Izuku. Yuga agreed, questioning what the secret could be. Tsu recalled that when the villains had attacked, Aizawa-sensei had referred to Izuku as Arclight and mentioned something about work. Jiro speculated that it likely related to Izuku's battle with the villains and turned to Momo for answers. Momo regrettably informed them that she could not share any information. This was a decision they needed to make on their own, and even she was not fully informed. Tokoyami wondered if Izuku's reluctance to share everything meant he did not trust them. Yayorus quickly defended Izuku, asserting that it was not a matter of trust but rather that he was unable to disclose certain things. Even if he could, he might hesitate out of fear of their judgment. Izumi connected the situation to Izuku's actions at USJ, realizing she had witnessed him in battle. Momo confirmed that it was indeed related to that incident. Ijiro asked for clarification, while Bakugu interrupted, expressing his frustration over the group's focus on Izuku, insisting he was better. Sato remarked that he had hoped Bakugu would have improved, suggesting he was just afraid of facing Izuku again. Bakugu challenged Sato, ready to confront him. Shoto stood up, joined by several others, ready to support Sato. Bakugu, feeling overwhelmed, decided to leave and retreated to his room. Ochako expressed surprise at Shoto's defense of Izuku, believing he did not care for any of them. Shoto admitted he did not, but he respected Midoriya and felt a connection with him. Nightshade re-entered the room, catching everyone off guard. He inquired if they had made their decision. Ijiro declared that he wanted to know more about Izuku, and the others nodded in agreement. Nightshade explained that they were being informed now because they could no longer be kept in the dark after the recent attack. He revealed that it all began with his organization, Parabellum, which was the world's best-kept secret. Izumi felt a rush of panic as she looked around at the chaos unfolding. Villains had invaded, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. She turned to Ida, urging him to run to UA for help. There was a sense of urgency in her voice, a stark contrast to the calm demeanor of Izuku, who stood nearby. His usual carefree spirit seemed to have vanished, replaced by a serious tone that sent chills down her spine. Izumi had always admired how Izuku interacted with others, his laughter and joy infectious. But now, he appeared distant, as if the weight of the situation had extinguished his light. It felt profoundly wrong to see him like this. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos, demanding everyone to move. Ida, ever the dutiful friend, took off towards the door. But just as he did, a villain emerged, blocking their path. Izumi watched in horror as 13 attempted to use her quirk, only for the villain to counter her attack with a portal, causing her severe injury. In the midst of the chaos, the villain turned his attention to Ida, but before he could reach him, Todoroki and Bakugu sprang into action, diverting the villain's focus. Seizing the opportunity, Izumi activated her telekinesis, lifting the villain off the ground and slamming him down repeatedly until he finally fell unconscious. The battle was far from over, but Izumi felt a surge of determination. She would protect her friends and fight alongside them, no matter the odds. Izuku slowly opened his eyes, struggling to adjust to the unfamiliar ceiling above him. It was dark outside, and he realized he must have been taken to a hospital. He wondered how long he had been unconscious. It could have been hours or even months since he had last faced his limits. As he shifted slightly, he felt a weight on his chest. Looking down, he saw a pair of groggy but beautiful onyx eyes staring back at him. He reached out, gently caressing her cheek with his thumb and greeted her affectionately, feeling a warmth spread through him. Her eyes widened as she fully woke up, and she immediately leapt into his arms, wrapping herself around him tightly and burying her face against his chest. Momo expressed her relief that he was finally awake, her voice trembling with emotion as she used the pet name she reserved for their private moments. Izuku called her name softly, and as she looked up into his eyes, he leaned down to kiss her, a gesture that conveyed the depth of his feelings. After a few moments, he pulled away, holding her close and savoring the warmth of her embrace. Curious about how long he had been out, he asked Momo. She informed him it had been a week and added that Nightshade was waiting for him, ready to share new orders. Concerned, he inquired about everyone's well-being, and she reassured him that they were all fine, though Bakugu and Izumi had not visited. Momo revealed that Izumi was right outside, sleeping in a chair, having been there every day along with All Might and Verde Esper. Izuku sighed, deciding there was no point in getting upset about it now. He asked Momo to call Nizu, Nightshade, and All Might, but before she could get up, he held her back, wanting to enjoy the moment a little longer. He pulled her into bed with him, wishing to forget everything else for the night and drift back to sleep. In the dormitory, Momo observed her classmates grappling with the revelations about Parabellum. Nightshade had just explained the organization's role, leaving everyone speechless. She understood their shock. It was hard to believe that Izuku was not only part of this secret group but also held a high-ranking position meant to protect them. Ida expressed his disbelief, questioning how the government could allow Nightshade to kill so easily, insisting that heroes were meant to capture villains, not take their lives. Nightshade challenged him, asking if he was comfortable letting innocent people suffer just to imprison one villain. Ida protested, confused about how locking up a villain could lead to suffering. Nightshade explained the harsh realities of the world, illustrating a scenario where a small-time thug, once released, would seek revenge against the hero who had imprisoned him, potentially targeting innocent families instead. The room fell silent, everyone shocked by the implications of Nightshade's words. He clarified that he wasn't there to change their minds but to encourage them to think deeply about justice, especially for Izuku, who had already endured so much. Kirishima asked why Izuku would suffer, prompting Momo to speak up. She shared that Izuku was afraid of being hated and abandoned again, emphasizing his emotional struggles. She explained how deeply he cared for his friends and how taking a life weighed heavily on him, despite his actions being driven by a desire to protect them. Shoji voiced his understanding, stating that he couldn't blame Izuku for his choices, especially since none of them had been in the line of fire. He acknowledged that Izuku had risked his life to protect them, even knowing the potential for their judgment. As the classmates processed Shoji's words, they began to realize the gravity of Izuku's sacrifices. Kirishima declared that Izuku was a true hero, and the others nodded in agreement, expressing their solidarity. Mina added that Izuku was one of them, and nothing could change that. Momo felt tears of gratitude welling up, touched by their understanding and support. Chapter End. Izuku sensed the presence of his old friend and teammate, Nightshade, and slowly opened his eyes to see him standing nearby. Nightshade commented on how he still couldn't catch Izuku off guard, especially since he was busy. Izuku smiled, explaining that he was even more alert when Momo was around, as he couldn't afford to slip up with her by his side. He then asked Nightshade to call him Izuku or Arclight, noting that Nightshade was a captain himself now. Nightshade expressed his nostalgia for the old days when he simply followed orders, lamenting the burdens of paperwork, which he found more tedious than facing danger. Izuku acknowledged their reunion but suspected it wasn't just a friendly visit. Nightshade confirmed he had a report and a new order for Izuku, indicating it was top secret. Izuku requested a moment to prepare and asked Nightshade to contact Nizu while he stepped out. Once the door closed, he gently nudged Momo awake. She stirred, lifting her head from his chest, looking around in confusion. Izuku greeted her, and as she turned to him, he leaned in and shared a kiss. Momo's eyes widened in surprise before she melted into the kiss. After a brief moment, they pulled apart. Momo inquired how long he had been awake, and Izuku replied it was only a few minutes. He apologized for waking her but mentioned he had things to do and couldn't stay in bed all day, despite how much he enjoyed it. Momo's face flushed at his words, and she playfully warned him that she would get him back for this when he was better. Izuku found it worth the risk as he sat up, realizing he was shirtless. He froze, aware that his scars were visible to Momo. Although they had shared NTMT moments, he had never wanted her to see them. He hated his scars, knowing he couldn't hide them forever. Momo placed a hand on his back, tracing the scars with her fingertips. Izuku asked if they were unsightly, but Momo reassured him that they were not ugly, they were proof of his survival. Her words brought a smile to his face, as she always knew what to say. He thanked her and requested a shirt, preferring to keep his body hidden from others. Momo blushed again and handed him a sleeveless black t-shirt that fit snugly. Izuku raised an eyebrow at her, and she cheekily remarked that he hadn't specified a size. As much as he enjoyed her company, Izuku asked Momo to return later, noting that their guests were likely waiting. He then called out to the others, asking how much longer they intended to eavesdrop. Nizu entered the room with Nightshade and All Might, and Izuku suppressed his frustration, knowing he needed to discuss the Nomu situation. Momo promised to return later and urged Izuku to stay calm as she left the room. Once she was gone, Izuku turned his attention to the matter at hand. He began explaining what he had learned about the Nomu. He revealed that Tamura, the one who had been attacking Aizawa, was the ringleader, and their plan was to kill All Might. Initially, Izuku thought it was just empty threats, but the appearance of the Nomu changed everything. He described how a single punch from the creature had broken multiple ribs, including his reinforced ones, and he believed it could have killed anyone else. He detailed the Nomu's multiple quirks, including hyper-regeneration, shock absorption, and super strength, allowing the information to sink in. Izuku concluded that if the Nomu was artificially created, there could be more out there. Nizu acknowledged that burning the Nomu was a necessary choice, even if it meant losing potential information. Nightshade pointed out that someone was mass-producing weapons designed to counter All Might, which posed a significant threat. All Might sought clarification, and Nightshade explained that Parabellum dealt with both villains and rogue heroes. He noted that Izuku was Japan's answer should any of the top heroes go rogue, highlighting the seriousness of the situation. Nizu advised All Might not to dwell on that too much, emphasizing the importance of their next steps now that All for One had resurfaced. Izuku agreed, believing it was the only explanation that made sense. Multiple quirks and a desire to eliminate All Might were at play, and it seemed he had found a successor. Taking a deep breath, Izuku acknowledged the gravity of the situation. As much as he disliked asking for help, he knew he couldn't face multiple enemies of All Might's caliber alone. If All for One could create one of these threats, he could certainly produce more. Izuku needed more strength. He turned to All Might and requested, albeit reluctantly, for him to pass on his power. All Might understood the weight of Izuku's request. He recognized that despite their differences, Izuku was worthy of One for All not just because of his strong quirk, but because of his unwavering heart. All Might reflected on the hardships Izuku had endured and admired his refusal to succumb to darkness. He plucked a hair from his head and offered it to Izuku, urging him to become the hero he could not be. Izuku accepted the hair, knowing this act would change nothing between them. Nightshade, observing the exchange, commented on the peculiar method of acceptance, finding it rather unappealing. Izuku, still grappling with the taste, shifted the conversation to the mission at hand. He inquired about the orders that had come down while he was out. Nightshade reported on the investigation into a certain kid, revealing that while there was no information yet, he had uncovered something concerning the USJ incident. Reporters had broken into UA on the same day, which struck Izuku as odd. He suspected that the villains had known All Might would be at USJ, and concluded that the reporters were a diversion. However, the teachers had responded too quickly for anyone to infiltrate unnoticed. Still, the information had leaked, prompting Izuku to connect the dots. Realization dawned on him as he pieced together Nightshade's implication. He understood what his new order was. When All Might asked for clarification, Izuku confirmed his suspicion. His new mission was to find the traitor. Chapter End. Underground Training Bunker. Izuku POV. Izuku sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose, feeling frustrated. It had been a day since he had received One for All, and he was trying to suppress his resentment toward All Might to learn how to use this new power. This special underground training facility, originally designed for All Might during his school days, felt more like a trap than a place of learning. He was stuck with All Might, and his mood was far from cheerful. It seemed that not only was All Might a poor father, but he was also a less than stellar teacher. All Might expressed his apologies, struggling to explain the concept of One for All. He mentioned something about clenching and letting his heart cry out, "Smash," which only added to Izuku's frustration. He couldn't understand what All Might meant, and the lack of progress was disheartening. According to All Might, One for All should have merged with his realizability and boosted his capabilities. Izuku felt a warm, tingling sensation in his core, but he was unsure how to access it. Deciding to start from the basics, he crafted a simple concrete brick from the floor. It was nothing new, so he attempted to create another brick using the matter in the air. As he dropped the brick and shifted his focus, he heard the thunk of it hitting the ground. Turning back, he was astonished to find both bricks still intact and identical. He examined the bricks closely, unable to contain his amazement. Normally, when he crafted using Realize, he employed one of two methods. The first involved using the correct materials, making the crafted item permanent. The second method utilized matter from the surrounding air, but anything crafted this way was unstable and would dissolve over time or if he lost focus. Holding up the second brick, he explained to All Might that it had been made using the second method and was still here. This revelation suggested that One for All had resolved his greatest issue. He no longer needed to maintain focus on his crafted items, alleviating the risk of falling into a coma from overexertion. However, the tingling sensation remained unexplained. Izuku pondered this when All Might asked about his ability called Warlord. Surprised that All Might had pointed out something he had overlooked, Izuku decided to demonstrate. He warned All Might to stand back, unsure of what would happen next. Closing his eyes, he activated Warlord and felt a surge of power coursing through him. When he opened his eyes, he was enveloped in lightning tinged with green and silver. He lifted his hand to observe the lightning dancing along his skin before glancing at a target 100 feet away. With a burst of speed, he dashed toward the target but miscalculated, crashing into the wall and embedding himself face-first into it, creating a large crater. All Might rushed over, concerned for Izuku's well-being. Izuku attempted to pull himself free but found he was stuck. He reluctantly asked for All Might's help, extending his arm as far as he could. All Might grasped his hand and pulled him out gently but firmly. Once free, Izuku expected him to let go, but he did not. Izuku's voice turned cold as he questioned All Might's actions, his anger simmering beneath the surface. All Might, visibly shaken, pleaded for a moment of understanding. He expressed his sorrow over Izuku's previous injuries and the pain it caused Inko, Izuku's mother, and himself. He was not asking for forgiveness but for a chance to mend their relationship. Izuku watched as All Might powered down, falling to his knees with tears streaming down his face. Still holding onto Izuku's hand, he clasped it between both of his and placed it on his forehead, as if in prayer. Looking down at the vulnerable Toshinori, Izuku felt the urge to strike him. He balled up his other hand, lifting it above All Might's head, but paused just a centimeter away. All Might did not flinch or react. With a sigh, Izuku opened his fist and gently patted All Might's head 3 times before withdrawing his hand and stepping away. Without turning back, he spoke, stating that he did not forgive All Might, Inko, or Izumi. He would tolerate them for now, especially Izumi, who was just a child. He acknowledged that while they were only human and made mistakes, the family life they desired with him would never happen. He had spent more time away from them than he had lived with them. Without waiting for a response, he left for the dorms. Chapter end. 1A dorms during Izuku's coma. Bakugu POV. He couldn't help but feel that everything happening was Deku's fault. Things were finally starting to improve when he showed up again. As he lay back on his bed, frustration bubbled within him. How had that guy become so strong? He had once been a quirkless nobody, and there had to be more to this situation. Deep down, he acknowledged that Deku was stronger, much stronger. The thought irritated him. It was infuriating to realize that Deku could easily defeat him. During their training battles, Deku had toyed with him, even going so far as to threaten him. He was determined to become the next #1 hero, so how dare Deku challenge him? The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Deku was getting everything that was rightfully his. He should be the one with Izumi as his fiancée. Those other girls should be his side companions, and the rest of his classmates should worship and fear him. They were merely stepping stones on his path to greatness. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was a classmate he considered an extra. He jumped off the bed, fists raised, ready to confront them. What did they want? How had they even entered his room? The classmate urged him to relax, explaining that it wasn't about their desires but rather about what he needed. He scoffed, insisting he didn't need anything. With a small explosion from his palms, he demanded they leave. But the classmate continued, suggesting he would never surpass Izuku. That statement froze him in place. He couldn't let that slide. He turned to face the classmate, who wore a smirk. They claimed that if he truly wanted to defeat Izuku, he would need more power. They hinted at knowing a way for him to become stronger than Deku. Intrigued, he released the classmate and locked eyes with them, demanding to know more. The classmate explained that someone could help him gain the strength he desired, but first, he needed to prove his worth. Soon, UA would announce the sports festival, and if he performed well, he would earn the power he craved. A smirk crept across his face as he thought about finally putting Deku in his place. He agreed to the plan, determined to show everyone, especially Deku, that his rightful place was at his feet. Byron Rojas, an American at 20 years old, stood at 5 feet 11 inches and weighed 210 pounds. With striking blue eyes and white hair, he was known as Flash within the ranks of Parabellum. Despite being quirkless, Byron had proven himself to be an exceptional marksman, capable of competing with pro heroes. His journey began when he was abandoned at the age of 10 and faced bullying for his lack of a quirk. He was eventually recruited by Parabellum, where he found a sense of belonging. Byron's first mission involved a raid on a villain compound, a harrowing experience that made him realize how much worse life could be. It was during this mission that he met Izuku, and their shared past forged a strong bond between them. After Izuku joined Parabellum, the two became close friends. When Izuku was given command of Alpha Team, Byron vowed to catch up and join him. A few years later, he fulfilled that promise, becoming Izuku's second-in-command in the new Alpha Team. As the oldest member, he took on a big brother role, bringing humor and positivity to the team while displaying a fierce demeanor in combat. Nemur, sure, a 19-year-old from Japan, stood at 6 feet 0 inches and weighed 196 pounds. With red eyes and black hair, he was known as Sleeping Death. His quirk, Nightcrawler, allowed him to slip into shadows and move with incredible speed, although it came with limitations that left him exhausted if overused. Growing up, Nemur faced bullying due to his villainous quirk, which led to a turning point when he retaliated against his parents. After this incident, he was captured and recruited by a member of Alpha Team, Paradox, who saw a reflection of Izuku in him. Though calm on the surface, Nemur had a hot-headed side, particularly when it came to protecting those mistreated for their quirks. He developed a deep respect for Paradox and Parabellum, viewing them as his true family. His determination and hard work earned him a place in Alpha Team after just 3 years. Liliana Yanagi, an 18-year-old with Japanese and French heritage, stood at 5 feet 8 inches and had green eyes and blonde hair. Known as Sandstorm, her quirk, Vibration Impact, allowed her to vibrate her limbs at high speeds, transferring energy to her targets. While her abilities were powerful, overuse led to extreme vertigo. Coming from the Kanagi family, which had a long history with Parabellum, Lily began training with her father, Jin Yanagi, at a young age. Her prodigious talent led to a superiority complex, prompting her father to seek help from Hisashi Midoriya, who suggested sparring with his son Izuku. Lily underestimated Izuku, expecting an easy victory, but instead faced a humbling defeat. Izuku's kindness and humility in the face of his strength left a lasting impression on her, sparking an interest that blossomed into affection. Determined to follow in Izuku's footsteps, she transferred to the Japan branch of Parabellum and worked her way into Alpha Team, unaware of the engagement that awaited her. Chapter End. After the meeting with Nightshade, Nizu, and All Might, Izuku was cleared by Recovery Girl and decided to head back to the dorms with Momo accompanying him. Instead of attending class, he chose to rest in his room, preparing for the training session with All Might the following day. He knew he needed to conserve his energy, and although Momo wanted to stay with him, he insisted she get some rest. He had noticed she hadn't been sleeping well, so he encouraged her to sleep in her own room. Normally, he would have let her stay in his bed, but he had work to do. After ensuring Momo was comfortably tucked in and asleep, he returned to his room and closed the door behind him. Moving to his work desk, he removed the false bottom and retrieved his custom laptop designed for Parabellum operators. Once the laptop was booted up and he was logged in, he began reviewing recent reports, case files, and incidents. A couple of cases caught his attention. A vigilante in Hosu was targeting fake heroes. While he could appreciate the intent, the individual was misguided, attacking pro-heroes without any evidence of wrongdoing. Another case involved a suspected Yakuza group that had shown a recent spike in activity, but there was nothing conclusive. All Parabellum could do was monitor the situation until something significant occurred. Shifting his focus, he searched for the report from Nightshade and his partner. Upon finding the file, he read through their findings. Both Nightshade and his partner shared his thoughts. None of the teachers were under suspicion. If a teacher had intended to betray UA, Tamura would have known that All Might was not at USJ during the beginning of the attack. The general course students were also cleared. They lacked access to the hero course classrooms and staff rooms. If they possessed strong or unique quirks, they would be in the hero course, where they would have some access to sensitive information. This left only the students from 1A, 1B, and the support course. None of these groups could be cleared. These classes were the most likely to harbor the traitor. Izuku had managed to narrow down his search, but over 60 individuals remained to be investigated. After contemplating for another hour, he eliminated 3 more names from the list: Momo, Izumi, and Bakugu. Momo was a given. He spent too much time with her to miss any changes. Izumi could be ruled out because, if she were a traitor, there would be no need to target All Might at UA. She could simply arrange to catch him off guard. That left Bakugu. Although he was certainly someone to keep an eye on, he was too overt, rash, and impulsive to execute a covert operation. Additionally, he was already under scrutiny and had come up clean in previous investigations. Now that the USJ attack had failed and Izuku had been exposed, he realized that as long as the traitor wasn't completely foolish, they would likely remain quiet for a while, understanding that security would tighten after the attack. A thought suddenly struck him. He had been exposed, but only to 1A. If the traitor went silent, they must be among those in 1A. While he couldn't prove it, it seemed the most likely scenario. If this were true, they would be cautious around him. He decided to leave the investigation of 1A to his partner, as he still couldn't completely rule out 1B or the support course. He then remembered something he had overlooked, something he had been reluctant to confront. His classmates and friends now knew who he was. He doubted they would understand the reasons behind his actions. It pained him to realize that he might never have a normal life or friends. He loved his team like family, but it felt nice to experience normalcy, even if it was fleeting. At least he still had Momo, though that wasn't entirely normal either. To cope, he decided to channel his feelings into the only way he knew how without causing destruction. He stored his laptop and replaced the false bottom before crafting a guitar. Momo was worried about Izuku. Hours had passed since she woke up, and classes had ended for the day. Everyone had returned to the dorms, and noticing her presence, many approached her, inquiring about Izuku. She informed them that he had been released that morning and was resting, planning to return to class the next day. Mina asked how he was doing, and Momo replied that physically he was fine, but she was uncertain about his emotional state. She took a seat on the couch across from Izumi in the common area. Denki expressed concern, reminding everyone that they had agreed Izuku was one of them, no matter what. Jiro pointed out that while they had made that decision, they had overlooked an important detail. Shoto added that Izuku had been in a coma for the past week, which surprised the usually stoic teen. Realizing the significance of this fact, everyone exclaimed in unison that Shoto was right. Kirishima suggested they go tell Izuku, not wanting him to think they hated him after everything he had done for them. Before Momo could intervene, the group rushed up the stairs toward Izuku's room. She followed closely behind, losing sight of them until she reached the top floor. Upon arriving at Izuku's door, she found everyone frozen in place, listening intently. As she approached, she understood why. Izuku was singing. Izuku had expressed his feelings through music, and as he let the guitar fade away, he decided it was time to eat. He stood up and turned toward the door, only to be tackled by several of his classmates. Confused, he began to form a blade to defend himself when he realized who it was. Kirishima, with tears in his eyes, embraced him tightly, declaring that Izuku was not alone and that he was a hero. It dawned on Izuku that they must have heard his song, even though his room was soundproof. They had come together as a group to check on him. Hagakure chimed in, reminding him that he was one of them and that he shouldn't feel sad or lonely because they were his friends. Overwhelmed, Izuku felt tears welling up. The weight on his shoulders lifted as their simple words brought him genuine happiness. He couldn't hold back the tears and wrapped his arms around his friends, expressing his gratitude for their acceptance. In the classroom, Izuku sat chatting with Momo and their classmates, inquiring about the condition of 13 and Aizawa. They informed him that both were fine but heavily injured and had not returned to school. Suddenly, the door swung open and Aizawa entered, looking exhausted. He admonished the class for their noise, and Izuku greeted him, questioning whether he should be teaching in his condition. Aizawa retorted, pointing out Izuku's own lack of rest. Aizawa then informed them that their challenges were far from over, revealing that the UA Sports Festival was approaching. Mineta expressed concern about the timing so soon after a villain attack, to which Aizawa explained that they could not cancel the event. Doing so would signal weakness to villains, and they needed to showcase their strength. The festival was also a global event, attracting scouts looking for talent. Izuku took over the explanation, assuring his classmates that they were aware of the situation and the importance of discretion. He mentioned that this year would be different, with increased security and the presence of top pro heroes, along with additional support from his team. Ida voiced skepticism about the security measures, but Izuku reassured him, hinting at the impressive roster of heroes that would be present. Aizawa concluded by giving them a week off to prepare for the festival, emphasizing the importance of making the most of their opportunities. As lunch began, Izuku and Momo made their way to the door, only for Uraraka to yelp in surprise at the crowd waiting outside. Mineta panicked, questioning why so many students were there. Bakugu, ever brash, pushed through the crowd, asserting that they were there to check out the competition after surviving a villain attack. Izuku noted Bakugu's unusual calmness but decided to keep an eye on him. A purple-haired teen from the general course approached, expressing disappointment in the hero course and declaring his intent to compete fiercely in the festival. He left without waiting for a response. Izuku addressed the remaining crowd, clarifying that not all of them were like the purple-haired student. He asserted that his class was strong and that anyone wanting a spot in the hero course would need to work hard for it. As he walked through the crowd, they parted to let him pass. In the lunchroom, after grabbing a bowl of katsudon, Izuku settled down with Momo and his classmates. Just as he began to enjoy his meal, something flew toward him from behind. Instinctively, he rolled to the side, flipped around, and swiftly disarmed his attacker, showcasing his reflexes and training. The only reason he didn't hit the ground was that I held him up by the collar. He seemed confused, and I made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate any more aggression. I warned him that if he ever tried to attack me again, he would regret it. With that, I let him drop to the floor. As he sat up, he began to complain about my class. He remarked that Class 1A was not only arrogant but also violent, immediately attacking someone without warning. He suggested that we needed every advantage to beat Class 1B. I felt a surge of anger at his words. There was something about his expression that made me want to punch him, but I fought against that instinct and held back. I pointed out that it was quite rich for him to call us arrogant when he had swung first at someone who was simply eating and not bothering anyone. Despite his sneak attack, my classmate had managed to dodge and put him on the ground. I questioned whether he had looked in a mirror lately or if his head was too far up his own ego. Before I could let my frustration escalate, an orange-haired girl with teal-colored eyes approached from behind him and swiftly knocked him out with a chop to the neck. She introduced herself as Itsuka Kendo and apologized for Manoma's behavior, assuring me that he didn't represent all of Class 1B. She offered her support, saying that if he bothered me again, I could come to Class 1B and ask for her. I was left bewildered by the sudden turn of events. It had been a week since Aizawa announced the upcoming sports festival. Everyone took advantage of the week off to train, and I was surprised when some of my classmates approached me for help. Momo, Kirishima, Uraraka, Shoji, and Izumi all sought my guidance. Initially, I hesitated to assist Izumi, but Momo persuaded me otherwise. She reminded me that I shouldn't let my emotions hinder my ability to do what was right. If Izumi became stronger, she could save more people as a hero. After the incident with All Might, I found myself grappling with conflicting emotions. Now that I was older, I understood that what happened that night wasn't All Might's fault, but the sense of betrayal I felt had set everything in motion. Emotionally, I struggled to comprehend why I had been overlooked and left behind. These thoughts tormented me, but they also fueled my determination to survive, even if it was just to prove a point to All Might. Despite my confusion, I helped my classmates in the mornings and trained in the afternoons with All Might. One for All was a complex quirk, and even All Might had limited knowledge about it. He shared the history of both All for One and One for All, filling in some gaps I had regarding the former. It turned out that One for All had evolved both Realize and Warlord, opening up new possibilities for me. I could now manipulate matter from the air without having to focus on maintaining its form. Although it would decay over time, it was still a significant boost. The evolved Warlord increased my strength tremendously, allowing me to physically match All Might in raw power. However, I still had limits. My body, even enhanced, could only sustain my full power for about 10 minutes. I decided to call this powered-up state War God, and limited my use of Warlord to a maximum of 50% to avoid burnout. As I waited for the festival to begin, I was pulled from my thoughts by the stoic Todoroki, who addressed me. He stated that, objectively, I was the strongest present, but that only motivated him to defeat me. I smirked at his comment, relishing the challenge. Denki exclaimed that it was a declaration of war against the strongest in class, while Kirishima questioned Todoroki's intentions just before we were set to go out. Todoroki clarified that he wasn't there to make friends but to prove a point, which involved defeating me. I looked into his eyes, trying to discern his true motivation. He didn't seem arrogant, so I wondered what drove him. I told him that I didn't know what he was trying to prove, but I was ready to take him on. I reminded him that if he wanted to take me down, everyone would need to give their all because I was going full force. Present Mick's voice boomed through the stadium, announcing the start of the UA Sports Festival, where young heroes would compete in a grand battle. He introduced Class A, the rising stars who had survived a villain attack, followed by the other classes. I couldn't shake the feeling that Nizu had orchestrated this, perhaps encouraging Present Mike to rile everyone up against us. On the other side of the stadium, Nizu could be heard laughing heartily. Back with the first years, Midnight announced it was time for the athlete's oath. Tokoyami questioned whether Midnight should be showcased on national television, and Midnight dismissed him. She then called for Izumi to step up as the student representative. Izumi introduced herself and expressed that, although she was chosen for this role, she didn't see herself as above anyone else. She acknowledged the hard work of all the students and wished everyone good luck. I smiled at her speech, appreciating the way it eased some of the tension directed at Class A. Midnight then declared the first event, the obstacle course. As we lined up at the starting gate, I considered how to showcase my abilities, knowing it was part of my mission and something I wanted to do. I smirked, realizing that Nizu likely hadn't used all his materials on just one robot. I had a plan. Momo asked if I was okay, concern evident in her expression. I assured her I was never better and promised to see her at the end before stepping back into the crowd. Lily felt a rush of excitement as she anticipated seeing Izuku again after several months. She couldn't help but wonder why he had gone undercover 2 months earlier than everyone else. Whenever she asked Byron or Nemur about it, they seemed to evade the question. Present Mike announced the next event with enthusiasm, declaring it a thrilling surprise for the future heroes. The stakes were high, as only the top 20 competitors would advance. Midnight explained the rules. Everyone who made it to the second round would receive headbands marked with a 0, while the top 20 would wear headbands numbered 1 to 20 based on their previous placements. The objective was to steal the headbands from the top 20, and if anyone lost their headband, they were out of the game. Quirks were allowed, but excessive force was prohibited. Izuku thought about the challenge ahead, realizing that those with numbered bands would be focused on protecting their headbands rather than chasing others. Midnight added that the principal had promised a reward for the first-place winner, which could be anything within reason, like skipping a class or getting a pass on an exam. The stakes were high, and Izuku felt a surge of determination. As the countdown began, Izuku sensed an intense atmosphere filled with competitive energy. He activated his warlord persona, ready to face the challenge ahead. He calmly stated that he was prepared for whatever came next, hoping to intimidate some of the weaker competitors. Bakugu shouted that he would come for Izuku's headband, while Shoto claimed he would take it instead. Izuku simply smiled at them, unfazed. Izumi raised her hand to ask Midnight if teaming up was allowed, to which Midnight confirmed it was, as long as they didn't use excessive force. Just then, Izuku felt a tap on his shoulder and turned to see a girl with striking golden eyes and pink hair. She introduced herself as Mei Hatsum and expressed her desire to team up with him. Izuku was taken aback by her boldness but managed to regain his composure. He gently pulled away from her and moved behind Momo, resting his head on her shoulder while glancing back at Mei. He explained that Momo was the only one he intended to partner with, causing Momo to blush slightly. Mei, realizing her mistake, quickly clarified that she meant teaming up for the competition, not anything else. She excitedly offered her inventions to help them succeed, and despite his reservations, Izuku agreed to team up with her, provided she shared more about her capabilities. Momo insisted on knowing about a fan club that Mei mentioned, and after some negotiation, they all agreed to work together. With their team formed, Izuku felt a sense of relief and excitement about the upcoming challenge. Meanwhile, Lily was struggling to keep her composure as Byron and Nemur restrained her, insisting that Izuku was focused on his mission and not romantically involved with anyone. She tried to convince them that she was calm, but they weren't buying it, keeping her tied down until the festival was over. Back in the arena, Izuku and his team were strategizing. Momo expressed her disbelief at Izuku's plan but understood the reasoning behind it. Izuku reminded her of their first date, where he had revealed his flair for the dramatic. He outlined the strategy. While he created a stage, Mei would use her gadgets to distract competitors with paintballs. He warned her to be careful with the pepper balls, as they could be painful if mishandled. With their plan set, Izuku felt ready to take on the challenge ahead, determined to make a mark in the competition. Once people entered their range, they would use their telekinesis to push them off and prevent them from climbing the walls. Izumi was determined, ready to support Izuku without letting him down. Momo and Izuku planned to create ammunition for Hatsum while tossing smoke and flash grenades into the crowd. They reminded everyone to stay calm, knowing that most would come after them at first. After ensuring everyone understood the plan, they all walked together to the center of the field, clearly visible to everyone. Midnight announced that they had to steal or survive for the next 15 minutes. As the starting gun fired, they anticipated the rush toward them. Activating his quirk, Izuku slammed his hands on the ground, crafting a small platform that measured 15 by 15 feet and raised it 20 feet into the air, complete with stairs on each side. As the stage rose, those charging at them froze, unsure of what to make of the sudden change. Continuing to craft, Izuku created a paintball gun, ammunition, smoke and flash grenades, and finally a speaker system. He set it up and prepared to engage. With a microphone in hand, he began to sing. Present Mike commented on Izuku's confidence and impressive voice, which caught the attention of the others. As the rush began, Izuku crafted a second paintball gun and started firing at anything that moved, all while continuing to sing. Hatsum dove into action, shooting at the crowd. Although her aim was off, her wild laughter and unpredictable movements scared many away. Izumi also played her part, using her quirk to push back anyone who got too close. She even found time to toss down smoke and flash grenades alongside Momo. Izuku felt the pressure as he balanced singing, crafting, and keeping an eye on the situation when he spotted two opponents flying toward them. Bakugu shouted in frustration, challenging Izuku's abilities. The first and closest threat was Bakugu. Izuku set the microphone down on a stand and continued his song while crafting a full-auto shotgun loaded with beanbag rounds. He aimed at Bakugu and fired, hitting him multiple times until the final shot knocked him down. With Bakugu dealt with, Izuku turned his attention to the second problem. Shoto was using his ice to create a ramp, and Izumi struggled to keep him at bay. Izuku signaled for Hatsum to return, and once she landed, he motioned for everyone to gather at the center of the stage. As he continued singing, he crafted a glass box around them, several feet thick with discreet holes for ventilation. The look on Shoto's face when he reached them, only to realize he couldn't get through without excessive force, was priceless. Midnight announced that time was up, and Present Mike praised Izuku for leading his team, fighting, and singing simultaneously. He noted that Izuku could have won without ever engaging in direct combat, showcasing a stunning display of confidence. Aizawa, with a smirk, remarked that Izuku was completely unpredictable. Midnight then announced the 20 participants moving on to the next and final round, starting with Izuku Midoriya, followed by Shoto Todoroki and Katsuki Baku. The remaining names were listed as Momo Yayoru, Izumi Yagi, Mei Hatsum, Azui, Hagakure, Ojiro, Denki, Ibara, Siro, Uraraka, Hida, Tokoyami, Kendo, Tetsutetsu, Kirishima, Manoma, and Shinszo. Midnight announced that there would be a break to fix the arena before the next round. Izuku found himself alone just after the second round ended. Momo had taken Izumi and Hatsum off somewhere for a girls' talk, whatever that meant. He assumed it had something to do with the fan club Hatsum mentioned. Deciding it was best not to dwell on it, he began to wander around the stadium. Since he was in the top 20 and had to compete in the third round, he didn't have to participate in the recreational games. However, he didn't feel like sitting around watching them either. He thought it would be a good time to find something to snack on. Crafting a half mask to conceal the upper part of his face and altering his uniform to resemble regular clothes, he also created a set of contact lenses to change his unique eyes to blue. He slipped out of the student area and into the spectator section, heading for the food stalls. The familiar scent of his favorite dish, katsudon, drew him in, and he made a beeline for the stall. After ordering a bowl and sitting at the counter, he practically inhaled his food after the first bite. This was definitely one of the better katsudon he had eaten. Next to him, a voice remarked that he must really love katsudon, mentioning that they had only seen their son eat a bowl so quickly. The last part was barely a whisper. Izuku turned to see Verde Esper, better known to him as Inko Yagi, his mother. She resembled an older version of Izumi, taller with longer green hair, and was quite attractive for her age. Seeing her sit next to him stirred up conflicting emotions, anger and sadness. He understood the anger, but the sadness puzzled him. Perhaps it was because she didn't recognize him. He began to think that maybe he wanted to forgive them. After realizing these thoughts and seizing the unique opportunity, he decided to talk with Inko. He expressed that katsudon was his favorite food that his mother had made for him as a child, one of the few comforts he found now that his family was gone. Inko immediately apologized, explaining that she hadn't meant to bring up sad memories. She had simply been reminded of her son. Izuku reassured her that it was fine, stating that he had lost his family a long time ago. He then asked if she was having issues with her son, noting that people usually don't compare family to a stranger without reason. Inko raised her head, struggling with her emotions before finally sighing and agreeing to share her story. She admitted to being a terrible mother, having hurt her son by not paying attention to him. She hadn't realized how bad his life had become until the day a villain took him from her. For 10 years, she had searched for him, raiding hideouts and interrogating villains, but never finding a clue. Then came the day of the UA entrance exam when her daughter Izumi excitedly informed her that her missing son had returned and was now a student at UA. Inko felt a surge of happiness but was soon met with her husband's request not to look for him. He had learned about the horrors their son faced during his time as a prisoner, and it broke Inko's heart to know that her son blamed her husband for what had happened. She expressed her desire to make things right, to fix what she had broken, but felt lost about how to approach her son, who barely spoke to Izumi and interacted even less with her husband. All she had was a picture of him with his girlfriend, taken by Izumi when he wasn't looking. She lamented that he had grown so much without her and that she had not been there when he needed her most. As Inko began to break down, Izuku felt a wave of guilt wash over him, realizing he had triggered this emotional outburst. He stood up, moved closer to her, and wrapped his arms around her in a comforting hug. After a few moments of silence, he let her go. Inko apologized for her emotional display, expressing that she felt he might have needed it. Regarding her situation with her son, Izuku advised her to give him time. He might eventually allow her back into his life. He suggested that a good start might be to make him his favorite food, reminding her that no one ever forgets their mother's homemade cooking, especially their favorite dish. He then excused himself, stating he had other places to be. With that, he paid his tab and made his way back to prepare for the next round. It had been a very eventful break. Izuku had run into his mother while getting food, and Momo and Izumi had returned from their outing. Momo wore a dark smile that made Izuku a bit nervous, while Izumi seemed somewhat intimidated by her. Deciding it was best not to pry, Izuku refrained from asking questions. As he sat in the waiting area, Midnight announced the matchups for the final round. After examining the brackets, he realized he would have to compete in 5 matches to win. Bakugu seemed to have fortune on his side, having been seeded in a random draw, which meant he would only need to win 3 matches. He had been fuming throughout the event, growing angrier as time passed. Izuku felt a twinge of worry when he noticed that Momo was in the same bracket as Bakugu. While he believed she could handle herself, he didn't fully trust Bakugu's temperament. Present Mike announced the highly anticipated battle tournament, energizing the crowd as he introduced the first round. Izuku Midoriya stepped into the arena, pushing aside his worries for the moment. Present Mike then revealed his opponent, Hitoshi Shinszo from the general course. As Shinszo approached the stage, Izuku recognized him as the student who had confronted Class 1A the previous week. Shinszo walked with confidence, a smirk on his face. Izuku felt a twinge of distrust. He knew better than to underestimate anyone, especially since he had no information about Shinszo or his quirk. Shinszo taunted Izuku, suggesting that it must be nice to have fans while he, nobody, would humiliate him by winning. Izuku remained silent, understanding that Shinszo was trying to provoke him into making a mistake. He admired the strategy but refused to engage. Midnight called for the competitors to take their positions and prepare for the match. Izuku assumed a defensive stance, keenly observing Shinszo for any clues about his quirk. Shinszo continued his verbal assault, making derogatory comments about Izuku's friends, which pushed him to the edge. Suddenly, Izuku found himself unable to move, realizing that Shinszo had somehow taken control of his body. As he struggled internally, Shinszo revealed that he had done his research and needed to win to prove that those with villainous quirks could be heroes. He commanded Izuku to walk out of bounds. Izuku's mind raced as he tried to find a way to break free. He understood that Shinszo's quirk involved some form of brainwashing that required a vocal response to establish control. Determined to disrupt the connection, he activated his quirk, Warlord, gaining limited control over his right hand. With a swift motion, he created a temporary weapon and shot himself in the knee, breaking Shinszo's hold. The crowd gasped, unsure of what was happening, but Izuku focused on standing up despite the pain. He used his quirk to repair his knee and crafted earplugs to block out Shinszo's voice. Turning to Shinszo, he expressed his understanding of his struggles while asserting his own determination to win. With a burst of speed, he charged forward and struck Shinszo, sending him out of bounds. Midnight declared the match over, announcing Izuku as the winner. Shinszo, frustrated by his loss, lamented his need to prove that his quirk was not villainous and his desire to become a hero. Izuku, sensing Shinszo's disappointment, encouraged him to raise his head and take pride in the fight they had just shared. He called out to Midnight, asking for permission to announce his prize. With a nod from her, he took the microphone and declared that he wanted Hitoshi Shinszo to be transferred from the general course to the hero course. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Midnight confirmed that Principal Nizu had approved the request. Izuku approached Shinszo with a smile and extended his hand for a handshake, welcoming him to the hero course. Shinszo accepted, his eyes filled with emotion as he expressed his gratitude and determination to become a great hero. Izuku promised to hold him to it, wishing him good luck as he walked back to the waiting area, ready to reunite with his classmates. I watched the rest of the rounds after receiving proper treatment for my knee, wanting to ensure my repairs held up during a match. Recovery girl scolded me for pushing myself too far, but I explained the necessity of healing. The matchups unfolded as I expected, with a few surprises. Ida's victory against Hatsum was unexpected. She had toyed with him, showcasing her inventions before stepping out of bounds herself. Denki's defeat against a 1B girl named Ibra was comical, especially after he confidently claimed he would beat her in 2 seconds. His antics were becoming legendary at school, and now that fame had spread internationally. Then there was the tiebreaker between our resident manly ginger, Kirishima, and 1B's Tetsutetsu. Their match resembled a Pokemon battle between two Ditto using mirror moves. Ultimately, they had to settle the contest with an arm wrestling match, which Kirishima narrowly won. The most surprising and concerning match was Uraraka's fight with Bakugu. She put up an unexpectedly strong fight, which seemed to provoke Bakugu to go all out. It appeared as though he was enjoying the intensity of the battle. In the end, Uraraka lost and was left injured. I, along with Ida, Tsu, and Momo, rushed to check on her. After ensuring she was okay, asked her how it felt to fight Bakugu. She confirmed my suspicions, saying it felt like he was deliberately prolonging the fight. My heart sank when Momo won against Tokoyami, meaning she would face Bakugu in the next round. Taking Momo aside into a hallway, I hugged her tightly, sensing her confusion at my sudden display of affection. I told her that I believed in her strength but urged her to be extra cautious with Bakugu, noting that he seemed unusually aggressive that day. I expressed my concern for her safety, emphasizing that she was in more danger than the others because of her connection to me. Momo acknowledged my worries and promised to be careful, encouraging me to focus on my own match. She then leaned in and kissed me deeply. I lost myself in the moment until I was called for my next match. Reluctantly, I let her go and made my way to the arena. Present Mike announced the start of the first match of the second round, 1A's unstoppable Izuku Midoriya versus 1B's copycat Nido Manoma. As I stepped into the arena, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. Standing across from me was Manoma, the blonde who had irritated me the previous week. I welcomed the opportunity to vent my frustrations. Midnight instructed us to take our places and prepare for the match. Manoma taunted me, claiming he would put me and my class in their rightful place at 1B's feet. I cracked my neck and rubbed the back of my neck, then crafted a 6-foot wall around the arena, smiling at him. I explained my reasoning for the wall, stating that I didn't want to win by ring out or allow him to escape. I offered him 30 seconds to try to knock me out. Manoma, feeling cocky, activated his quirk, covering himself in iron, reminiscent of Tetsutetsu's ability. I recalled what Present Mike had said about Manoma being a copycat. As he swung at me, I easily dodged his attacks, noting his lack of hand-to-hand combat training. I watched with amusement as he grew increasingly frustrated, sweating from his wild swings. When the countdown reached 0, I leaped aside to avoid him and activated Warlord at 25%. I delivered a knee to his gut, and as he bent over from the impact, I slammed my elbow onto his back, sending him bouncing back up. I grabbed him by the collar and flipped him over my shoulder, slamming him into the ground, creating a small crater. Not letting go, I flipped him again, then spun around to build momentum before flinging him into one of the walls I had constructed. I paused to see if he could still fight, wanting to defeat him without causing serious harm. When Midnight checked on him and declared that Manoma was unable to continue, I felt a rush of satisfaction. I deconstructed the walls and left the arena, exhilarated by the victory. Izuku cracked his shoulders and arms as he walked down the hall leading away from the arena. His muscles were tense from the match he had just fought against Manoma. Although he typically didn't enjoy inflicting pain, he felt that this was long overdue. Shoto leaned against a wall, seemingly waiting for Izuku. Izuku greeted him with a smile, curious about Shoto's reason for approaching him. Shoto mentioned that he had watched Izuku's match and noticed that his warlord ability resembled All Might's quirk. He questioned how Izuku's quirk could be so similar, jokingly suggesting that Izuku might be All Might's secret love child. Izuku pondered Shoto's inquiry, realizing it wasn't really a secret, at least until Izumi revealed it. He was uncertain if anyone remembered the bus ride to USJ, as no one had asked about Izumi being his sister or why he had a different last name. Shoto pressed on, asking if Izuku had heard of quirk marriages. Izuku gave him a deadpan stare, indicating he was very familiar with the concept. Shoto explained that he was the product of such a marriage, revealing that his father, Endeavor, had sought to create a child who could surpass All Might. He described how his father had forced his mother into marriage, believing her ice-type quirk would balance his own. After several failed attempts, Shoto was born, but the abuse his mother endured eventually led to her being confined to a mental hospital. Shoto expressed his determination to surpass Endeavor without relying on his flames, stating that he needed to defeat Izuku, especially if Izuku was indeed related to All Might. Izuku began to understand the similarities between them. Neither had a great family life or a happy childhood. He decided to share his own story with Shoto, revealing that he was not All Might's secret love child but rather his legitimate, long-lost son. He explained that he had chosen to abandon the Yagi name and took on the name of his adoptive father, Hisashi Midoriya. Shoto listened intently, his expression shifting to one of shock as he absorbed Izuku's story. Izuku acknowledged the scars he bore, explaining that most were from his time as a captive. He empathized with Shoto's feelings toward his father, understanding the pain that drove him. Shoto, visibly angry, confronted Izuku, questioning why he would suggest that he needed to use his full power. Izuku met Shoto's gaze, unwavering, and reiterated that he was speaking from experience. He challenged Shoto to consider whether he wanted to be a hero solely to defeat his father or if he genuinely aspired to be a hero. Shoto stood in shock, his grip on Izuku loosening as he contemplated the question. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and chuckled, acknowledging their friendship. He declared that he would embrace his full power, not to please his father, but because he wanted to succeed on his own terms. Good for you, Shoto. Only one problem with that, I'm not holding back either. Come at me and earn your spot. The protagonist gave his friend a light punch on the shoulder. Go ahead and head back, Shoto. I need to hit the bathroom. After Shoto left, he addressed their visitor. You can come out now, Mr. Number 2 Hero, he said in a cold voice as Endeavor appeared around the corner. Just as Shoto accepted his father's side, the protagonist sensed Endeavor's presence and decided to see how the situation would unfold. With Shoto revealing his past, he now had a reason to investigate the Number 2 Hero further. Endeavor praised Shoto for finally ending his rebellion against him, claiming that he would fulfill his destiny of defeating All Might. The protagonist retorted, expressing that he had acted for Shoto's future, not Endeavor's, and warned the hero to be more concerned about his own well-being. Endeavor, clearly angered, raised his voice in flames, demanding to know what the protagonist had said. Maintaining his calm demeanor, the protagonist activated an application of Realize without permission from HQ, feeling that Endeavor needed a lesson in power. He converted the oxygen around Endeavor into carbon dioxide, extinguishing his flames and making it difficult for him to breathe. He reiterated his warning, mentioning Parabellum, watching as Endeavor's eyes widened in shock and fear while he struggled for air. Activating Warlord at 10%, the protagonist grabbed Endeavor by the collar and slammed him against the wall. He confronted Endeavor about his apparent tendencies to harm children and women, suggesting that an investigation into his daily life was necessary. He warned Endeavor to hope that nothing incriminating would be found as he, Arclight, would ensure that he faced dire consequences in a villain attack. He added that it would be wise for Endeavor's wife to be home, emphasizing the seriousness of his threat. After delivering his warning, the protagonist returned the air to normal, allowing Endeavor to breathe again, and walked away, unwilling to deal with him any longer. He made his way back toward the waiting area, pausing to call his father and inform him about the situation with Endeavor, urging him to start an investigation. During the call, he updated his father on his life and his relationship with Momo. His father mentioned that he and the others were watching the festival and expressed their pride in him. Now that the second round was over, Momo could focus on the issue that had been bothering her since Hatsum mentioned it. The Muscles fan club. Apparently, her Zuzu had a fan club. Grabbing Hatsum and Izumi, she left Zuzu behind. He didn't need to be involved any more than necessary. After finding a quiet spot, she made a set of cork-sealing cuffs and quickly secured them on Izumi and Hatsum, tying them together. Momo addressed them, urging Hatsum to go first. Hatsum, a bit taken aback, explained that a couple of weeks ago, some girls had asked her to create a special camera. She thought it was an interesting idea and decided to help, laughing as she recounted the story without realizing why Momo was concerned. Momo pressed for details, asking what the camera was for. Hatsum replied that she wasn't entirely sure, but it had been a fun project. She excitedly revealed that she had made a camera capable of seeing through clothes. Momo's eyes widened in shock, and she noticed Izumi looked equally surprised, indicating she hadn't known about this detail either. Momo couldn't contain her frustration, questioning why Hatsum would create something so potentially dangerous. Hatsum dismissed her concerns, insisting that it had only blown up twice and seemed safe to her. She explained that the girls had claimed the camera would help them see if anyone was carrying hidden weapons. Momo shook her head, realizing she needed to get to the heart of the matter. She decided to deal with Hatsum later and turned to Izumi, shaking her shoulders slightly and demanding to know everything she knew. Izumi quickly clarified that she had no knowledge of the camera and didn't want to be implicated. Momo, trusting her sister's intentions, urged her to get to the point. Izumi relented, explaining that it all began during their battle training with All Might for the first heroics class. She reminded Momo of what they had overheard while the boys were changing. Momo's mind raced as she recalled the gossip about Mineta's crush on Kaminari, horrified at the thought that Mineta might be serious about having a harem and now targeting Zuzu. Izumi urged her to calm down, explaining that it wasn't about Mineta but rather what they had heard regarding Izuku's physique. Some girls had been trying to catch a glimpse of him without his shirt. Momo was incredulous, realizing that the fan club's interest stemmed from wanting to see her fiancé shirtless. Izumi admitted that things had escalated after Izuku had woken up. Momo questioned how she could have made things worse, but Izumi pointed out the skin-tight shirt Momo had made for him, which barely concealed his impressive physique. Momo shifted the topic, asking how Izumi fit into all of this. Izumi explained that not everyone had forgotten the bus ride to USJ. Since she was Izuku's sister, the girls thought she could help them see what they wanted. Momo was curious about what happened on the bus, and Izumi reminded her that she had been snuggled up in Izuku's arms. Tsu had asked why they looked so much alike, and Izuku had explained that they were twins. Momo noted that Izuku might be slowly getting over his shyness. Izumi continued, revealing that initially only a few girls from their class were interested in seeing Izuku shirtless. However, they quickly realized how careful he was. Aside from the boys, no one had ever seen him without his shirt. The girls began devising plans to catch a glimpse of him, attempting to follow him during his morning runs and workouts with Kirishima, but they always fell short. They even tried spilling drinks on him, but he was too quick and often caught the drink or the girl who tripped. Desperate, they sought help from other girls who had interacted with Izuku, promising pictures in exchange for assistance. Izumi noted that even though he was with Momo, Izuku was incredibly popular. Momo demanded names, stunned by the fan club's ambitions but understanding their appeal. She had only seen him shirtless once, but that didn't mean she would allow it to happen again. Izumi revealed that the fan club was larger than Momo thought, consisting of all the girls from Class 1A, with Mina and Toru being the two who started it. Momo sighed, not surprised by their involvement. She decided to deal with them soon enough and released Hatsum and Izumi from the cuffs, realizing she had too many things to manage. There was no point in punishing the messengers. She had a plan to devise. Chapter end. Izuku watched as Bakugu was taken away by medical staff, feeling a mix of emotions about the situation. He would have preferred to confront Bakugu directly, believing that sparing him now would only lead to future complications. He understood better than anyone that being quirkless did not equate to being powerless. He hoped Bakugu's inflated ego would work in his favor, knowing that the loss of his quirk would surely bring him suffering. Izuku wanted to rush to the med bay to be by Momo's side. But he had to attend the awards ceremony. With Bakugu unconscious and Momo also unable to participate, Kirishima was awarded third place by default. It seemed a lot had transpired during the matches. Kirishima was supposed to face Ida for third place, but Ida had to withdraw due to a family emergency. So, Izuku found himself on the winner's podium alongside Shoto and Kirishima, standing in that order. He zoned out during Midnight Sensei's speech and only snapped back to reality when All Might appeared in front of him. All Might praised Izuku for his remarkable qualities, highlighting his confidence, critical thinking, and leadership skills. Caught off guard by an unexpected hug, Izuku felt a surge of anger but chose to suppress it. He couldn't afford to lash out at the symbol of peace on live television. As he contemplated his options, All Might released him, and the ceremony concluded. The moment it ended, Izuku dashed to the med bay, eager to stay by Momo's side, just as she had done for him. Meanwhile, Bakugu sat in his hospital room, grappling with the reality of his situation. The words of the silver-eyed boy echoed in his mind, taunting him about his newfound quirklessness. He attempted to summon his quirk, but nothing happened. The familiar sensation that had always defined him was gone. He stared at his hands, feeling as if they belonged to someone else. How could this happen? He had always been the best, destined to be number one. Now, that future seemed shattered, all because of Izuku. A figure entered the room, reminding Bakugu of their previous encounter. He recalled their words about needing power and felt a flicker of hope that this person could assist him. The figure spoke, revealing that their master approved of Bakugu and was willing to help him regain power, but there was a price. Bakugu, desperate to reclaim his strength, agreed to do whatever it took. The figure's next words stunned him. He needed to withdraw from UA. Bakugu was taken aback. Leaving UA felt like abandoning his path to greatness. He questioned the reasoning behind such a drastic decision, but the figure pointed out that without his quirk, he could never surpass Izuku. Bakugu was disturbed by how much the figure seemed to know. He realized that if he wanted to be the best, he needed to take a different path. After contemplating the situation, he reluctantly agreed to follow the figure's guidance. With determination, Bakugu resolved to take the next steps necessary to regain his strength and prove himself once more. It was dark outside as Izuku sat in the chair next to Momo's bed, holding her hand. Earlier that day, Momo had broken into a sweat and started to whimper. Izuku had immediately taken her hand in his, giving it a gentle squeeze. The anger he felt toward Bakugu intensified, and he hoped this experience wouldn't leave lasting trauma on her. He watched as Momo gradually calmed down, realizing that she just needed to feel safe and secure. This was why he had hurried back. Not many understood how easily the mind could be affected. He wanted to be there for her, just as she had always been for him. A smile crept onto his face as he recalled their first date, her smile, her laughter. His life had slowly changed since she entered it. She had become irreplaceable to him. Feeling the urge to comfort her, he began to sing softly. Suddenly, Momo shot up from the bed and hugged him tightly, burying her head into his shoulder. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, and asked if he really meant it. Instead of answering, he simply gazed into her eyes and leaned in, kissing her gently. Words failed him, but his actions spoke volumes about how much she meant to him. Momo was taken aback by the sudden kiss but soon responded with equal passion. In that moment, nothing else mattered, neither UA, nor Parabellum, nor heroes and villains. They existed in a world created just for the two of them. Izuku felt the time was right, so he pulled away and stood up, turning his back to her. Using his quirk, He summoned materials from beneath the ground and crafted something incredibly special. Turning back to Momo, he knelt down and took her hand, revealing a silver ring adorned with a unique emerald. Crafting the emerald had been challenging due to the heart-shaped onyx gem within it, symbolizing that she would always hold a place in his heart. He looked at Momo, who was frozen in shock, unable to react to the unfolding moment. He spoke from his heart, expressing his love for her. He wanted to give her everything and asked if she would marry him. In an instant, Momo launched herself from the bed, tackling him to the ground. Tears streamed down her face as she softly cried. She exclaimed that an infinite number of yes wouldn't be enough to express her feelings. With joy radiating from her, she declared her desire to become his wife. Still pinning him down, she slipped the ring onto her finger and leaned in to kiss him. Izuku responded in kind, allowing his love for her to take over as they lost themselves in each other, momentarily forgetting the outside world. The following day after the sports festival, the class was settling in. Most students were present, but Bakugu was noticeably absent. His empty seat went largely ignored, as he had kept to himself since the beginning, and few seemed to notice his absence. Izuku felt a twinge of concern, not out of care for Bakugu, but rather due to the uncertainty of his actions, especially after Izuku had taken away his ability to use his quirk. He decided to contact HQ later to express his concerns. Aizawa entered the classroom, instructing everyone to sit down and be quiet. He mentioned that this would be the only class for the day, and the sooner they finished, the sooner he could rest. He had 4 important announcements to make. First, Bakugu had decided to withdraw from UA. Second, a new classmate would be transferring in after the internships ended. Third, everyone would be going on hero internships for a week, with more details to follow. Lastly, they would be choosing their hero names with Midnight's assistance. Aizawa scanned the room to ensure everyone understood the information he had just shared before continuing with the details of the hero internships. He would be handing out offers to those who received personal invitations. For those who did not receive any, he reassured them that they would still have internships. He then revealed the list of offers. Izuku Midoriya received an offer with the number Shoto Todoroki. Had 7,342, Momo Yayoru had 2,304, and Ejiro Kirishima had. Kirishima expressed his surprise at receiving so many offers, declaring it to be very manly. Izuku responded, acknowledging Kirishima's determination and strong will, which were important qualities for a hero. Aizawa interrupted, urging them to finish up so he could go see his 2 beloved companions. Mina, curious, asked if he had lovers, to which Izuku chuckled, knowing Aizawa's answer would be humorous. Aizawa clarified that his lovers were simply the back of his eyelids, prompting more laughter from the class. After a few moments, Midnight entered the room to assist everyone with their hero names. Izuku, not particularly concerned about needing a name, decided to go with something simple. After some time, everyone had chosen their hero names, except for him. He approached Midnight and revealed his chosen name, the unseen hero, Arclight. Midnight complimented the name but inquired about the meaning behind unseen hero. Izuku explained that he preferred to avoid fame and simply wanted to help others. Midnight expressed her excitement about his ideals and strength, playfully suggesting that she might consider a different role for him. Feeling a sudden chill in the room, Izuku hesitated to look at the source but quickly decided to address it. He politely informed Midnight that he was already committed to someone he was happy with, gesturing toward Momo. Midnight then playfully asked Momo if she wanted to share, leaving Izuku stunned by her unexpected response. Momo reacted with disbelief, questioning the size of the fan club surrounding Izuku. Some of their female classmates flinched, while the boys looked confused, except for Mineta, who seemed to know something. Amidst the chaos, All Might entered the room and requested Izuku and Izumi to step out for a moment. Izuku followed, suspecting it might relate to One for All, though he felt uneasy about it. Soon, both he and Izumi found themselves in All Might's office. All Might explained that he wanted to discuss their internships. He had a special offer for both of them from his old mentor, Grand Torino. He informed them that Grand Torino was aware of Izuku's connection to One for All and could help him with control, while Izumi would benefit from improving her reaction times and telekinesis. Izuku and Izumi expressed their interest and reluctance, respectively. Izuku explained that while he recognized his control over One for All wasn't complete, he learned better through practical experience. He also mentioned that with everyone else away on internships, he wouldn't need to stay at UA as much, as he had plans to return to HQ and catch up on work, possibly checking in on his team. All Might understood but asked if Izuku could at least visit Grand Torino once during the internships. Izuku couldn't promise anything but agreed to try and requested the address later. All Might noted that he didn't have Izuku's contact information, prompting Izuku to suggest that he could obtain it from Nizu or Izumi later. With that, Izuku left the office and returned to class. After classes ended, the protagonist met with Izumi and shared their contact information. Noticing her teary eyes, they walked into the common area and spotted their partner, signaling for them to join in their room. After about 45 minutes, the partner arrived. The partner inquired about the situation, and the protagonist explained the need to send a message to HQ regarding Bakugu. The partner agreed to relay the message but expressed doubt about its approval due to Parabellum being stretched thin. They mentioned other incidents at various schools, which had raised concerns at HQ, leading to a pull of resources from other branches. The protagonist was taken aback by the severity of the situation but accepted there was little they could do. They asked if there were any messages for them, to which the partner replied that they would be stationed nearby at a cover hero agency during UA's internship PRD. They were tasked with investigating a suspected villain hideout, which would be raided if confirmed. The protagonist expressed appreciation for their partner's cover identity, noting that even Nizu had not figured it out yet. They welcomed the partner to Alpha and encouraged them to take care of themselves and UA while they were away. The scene shifted to Izuku, who was at the train station waiting for his mission partner, Sandstorm, whose real name was Liliana Lily Yanagi. She was a member of Alpha and an old friend. They had met 3 years prior when Izuku's father arranged a sparring match for them, as Lily needed more combat experience. Izuku quickly learned that it was better to avoid Lily's hits than to try to withstand them. Her quirk, Vibration Impact, was powerful and effective for breaching. She had filled in for Ramrod on the Alpha team a few years back. When Lily arrived, she greeted Izuku with enthusiasm, having not seen him in months. She shared her relief at being able to leave CI and attend the UA Sports Festival, although she mentioned witnessing something unpleasant. Izuku apologized for Bakugu's actions, explaining he had received permission from HQ to intervene. Lily clarified that her comment was about something else, but before she could elaborate, their train to Hosu arrived. They boarded, ready to meet their contact and begin their investigation. Upon arriving in Hosu, they met with their contact and proceeded to a safe house for a mission briefing. Parabellum had received intel about known C-rank villains entering a target warehouse, but none had been seen exiting. This raised concerns about a possible secret exit or a larger-than-expected facility. After the briefing, their contact provided them with black uniforms and Lily's preferred twin set of pistols. Once geared up, they headed toward the warehouse, moving cautiously along the edge of the woods. The protagonist began to formulate a plan, instructing Sandstorm to circle around the other side while maintaining radio silence unless necessary. Sandstorm agreed and set off to carry out her part of the mission. The protagonist continued to observe the area, taking note of the layout and waiting for any signs of activity. Days passed with little to report until the 6th day of the mission, when they noticed movement at the main entrance. A familiar purple mist portal opened, revealing 2 unexpected figures. The protagonist recognized Tamura and Kurogiri, realizing the situation had just become much more complicated. They whispered to Sandstorm about the significance of their presence, noting that both were linked to a previous incident. Sandstorm asked what they knew about the two, and the protagonist explained that little information was available. They estimated Kurogiri's rank to be B and Tamura's to be A, cautioning Sandstorm to avoid contact with Tamura due to his decay quirk, which required physical touch. The protagonist also shared their uncertainty about Kurogiri's warping abilities, suggesting he might need to see where he opens a warp. Sandstorm expressed concern about Kurogiri's capabilities, while the protagonist reminded her not to underestimate Tamura. He might be a giant baby, but that baby had a loaded gun and a temper. They decided to wait for a moment before moving in, planning to approach quickly and quietly. The goal was to catch their targets off guard, and at least one of them needed to be alive for questioning about the mysterious Nomu used at USJ. After a few minutes, they moved in. As they approached the door, it was opened slowly and carefully. One slipped inside, followed closely by Sandstorm. The interior was cluttered with crates, barrels, and random debris. There was no immediate sign of their targets, but luck was on their side. Everything was covered in dust, except for a trail of footprints leading toward a pile of crates. A gesture was made toward the pile, and Sandstorm nodded, drawing her pistols. Moving closer, one pushed slightly against the crates, which slid quietly aside to reveal a tunnel. Entering first and confirming the area was clear, a signal was given to Sandstorm, who then closed the hidden door behind them. They crept along the dimly lit path. Eventually, they reached the end of the tunnel, which opened into a large room filled with solid containers. This area had clearly been well traveled, making it impossible to track their targets further. As they moved through the room, passing in front of one of the containers, something caught their attention. The containers had doors with sliding covers at eye level. A signal was given for Sandstorm to cover for a moment. Standing up, the cover was carefully slid out of place, trying to avoid any noise. Once the eyes adjusted to the darkness, a sudden stillness took over. Those large, beady eyes, dark skin, a beak-like mouth, and an exposed brain were unmistakable. Recognition hit hard, and the realization of the place's true nature became clear. The number of containers confirmed earlier suspicions. This place wasn't a hideout, it was a factory, a Nomo factory. Early night, so readers received an early chapter. Thanks for reading and hope you enjoy. Izuku felt a surge of urgency as he turned to Sandstorm, expressing his determination to destroy the facility. He explained that the containers held Nomu, powerful bioweapons that posed a significant threat. Sandstorm quickly grasped the severity of the situation and agreed that they needed to take action. Izuku inquired if she could demolish the place, knowing her expertise in explosives. Sandstorm asked if they would need to recover bodies afterward or if they were going to completely obliterate the site. Izuku preferred the latter, emphasizing the risk of allowing any of the Nomu to escape. Sandstorm confirmed she could handle it, provided Izuku could maintain his focus to create the necessary explosives. After Izuku assured her he had resolved his previous limitations, Sandstorm outlined her requirements for the explosives. Izuku quickly crafted everything she needed, and they began rigging the room with charges, ensuring every container was covered. They worked swiftly, aware that time was of the essence. Once they finished, they made their way outside to a safe distance. Izuku crafted a detonator and tossed it to Sandstorm, suggesting she should be the one to trigger the explosion. She initially reacted with surprise but quickly regained her composure and expressed her eagerness to blow it up. With a nod from Izuku, she activated the detonator, and the warehouse erupted in flames and debris, shaking the ground beneath them. As the dust began to settle, a portal opened, revealing Tamura and Kurogiri. Tamura, disoriented, demanded to know what had happened, while Kurogiri reported the limited number of survivors he had managed to save. Izuku and Sandstorm exchanged a knowing glance, understanding their next move without needing to speak. Izuku crafted an M4 and they launched their attack simultaneously. He aimed at Tamura, firing 2 rounds that struck him in the shoulder and arm, eliciting a scream of pain. Meanwhile, Sandstorm engaged the nearest Nomu, her quirk causing its skin to writhe and eventually burst into a fine mist, accompanied by a death cry. She swiftly dispatched another Nomu, while the remaining ones rushed to protect Tamura. Tamura, spotting Izuku, realized who was responsible for his injuries and expressed his disbelief. Izuku taunted him, dismissing the M4 as ineffective in this situation. He activated his warlord ability and leaped toward Tamura, but the 3 Nomu jumped to intercept him. Kurogiri struggled to manage Sandstorm's unpredictable attacks, unable to redirect all of them effectively. Izuku, recalling his previous encounter with the Nomu, dodged their strikes while observing their lack of coordination. He noted their limited intellect as they inadvertently struck each other. Taking advantage of the moment, Izuku crafted a pistol and fired at Tamura again, hitting the same arm. Tamura's frustration boiled over as he demanded Kurogiri to get him out of the situation. Izuku refused to let him escape this time, but suddenly, the Nomu vanished through a warp gate. Kurogiri offered Izuku a choice: stay and fight or pursue the Nomu he had just released. Seizing the opportunity, he warped to Tamura, who shouted threats as the warp gate closed around them. Sandstorm expressed frustration at their escape, but Izuku reminded her that they had more pressing matters at hand. They needed to track down the remaining Nomu. Another early day brought another early chapter. Izuku felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The chaos around him had escalated quickly, and he called for Sandstorm to hop on his back. However, she insisted she could run on her own. With no time to argue, he activated his warlord ability at 60% and scooped her up in a bridal carry, sprinting toward the city. Sandstorm questioned his actions, but Izuku was focused on their urgent need to reach safety. He expressed his frustration, feeling responsible for the chaos caused by the Nomu. Guilt gnawed at him as he reflected on his training and experiences, feeling inadequate to protect those around him. A sharp pain on the side of his head brought him back to the moment, as Sandstorm reminded him not to blame himself. She pointed out that things could have been worse if they hadn't acted against the factory. Her words calmed him, and he acknowledged her support, expressing his affection for her like a sister. Sandstorm seemed taken aback by his admission, but he pushed aside any lingering thoughts and focused on their next steps. With 3 Nomu on the loose and only the 2 of them, they needed a plan. Izuku crafted a headset and called Nizu, urgently requesting help to mobilize heroes in Hosu. Once in the city, he landed in a back alley and set Sandstorm down, giving her a headset to stay in contact. They decided to split up, with Izuku taking to the rooftops while Sandstorm took the streets. As he leaped from building to building, he spotted one of the Nomu, a tall, thin creature with long arms preparing to attack civilians. He dropped down behind it and executed a flying kick, sending it crashing into a moving train. Just then, a yellow blur caught his attention as the Nomu was sent flying back off the train. It was Grand Torino, and explosions erupted in other parts of the city. Sandstorm updated him on her situation, confirming she was engaged with a Nomu. Izuku instructed her to finish her fight and move on to the next one. He rushed to Grand Torino's side, catching him before he collided with a wall after being swatted away by the Nomu. Grand Torino expressed his gratitude and curiosity about Izuku's identity. Izuku introduced himself as Arclight and thanked Grand Torino for looking after his sister. With no time to waste, he informed Grand Torino about the other Nomu and urged him to handle this one alone. After Grand Torino assured him he could manage, Izuku jumped away toward the location of the latest explosion. He landed on a rooftop overlooking an empty street where the last Nomu, a winged creature, was tossing pro-heroes and their sidekicks around effortlessly. Knowing he had to act without being seen, he crafted a flashbang and waited for the right moment. When the Nomu and heroes were distracted, he threw the flashbang between them. The explosion of light caused everyone to flinch, and Izuku seized the opportunity to tackle the Nomu, carrying it away from the chaos and back up to the rooftops. He maintained a firm grip on one of its arms while delivering punches with his other hand, determined to turn the tide of the battle. Suddenly, it spread its wings and took off into the sky with the protagonist still holding on. It didn't seem very affected by the punches, and then it slammed the protagonist into a building in an attempt to force them to let go. However, they held on tightly, crafting a K-bar and starting to stab at its stomach. The creature screeched in pain but remained airborne, retaliating with powerful punches from its one free hand. It continued flying into buildings, trying to crush the protagonist, who kept stabbing away at it. Burning it like the first one wasn't an option without risking self-harm. The protagonist recalled the first Nomu and the others they had encountered that day, realizing they shared a common feature: the exposed brain. Unsure if these creatures functioned like normal people, the protagonist decided it was worth a try. Letting go of the K-bar, they reached behind the creature's arm and grabbed the base of its wing. Once they had a solid grip, they released the other arm and did the same. With a powerful grip, they crushed the bones in its wings, causing it to begin falling. Seizing the opportunity before it could heal completely, the protagonist let go and grabbed its head with both hands. They dug their fingers into the exposed brain as deeply as possible, tearing out a chunk with one hand and then repeating the process with the other, alternating between the two. Suddenly, the Nomu went limp and stopped struggling, merely falling. It was then the protagonist realized a crucial fact. They were fighting midair, and now that the Nomu was dead, they were in free fall. With their back facing the ground, they quickly flipped the Nomu's body beneath them to cushion the impending impact. They shouted for help as they crashed into a back alley, coughing as the dust settled. As they regained their composure, they heard a groan from beneath the Nomu and peeked over its shoulder to see a strange-looking man without a nose. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise, realizing it had actually worked. They then asked the man if he was still alive. Izumi called out, recognizing the protagonist's name. Shoto and Ida also expressed their surprise at seeing them. The protagonist looked at them, noticing they appeared beaten up and that there was another unconscious person nearby. They inquired about what had happened and why the others were in such rough shape. Izumi explained that they had encountered Stain, who had caused them significant trouble. The protagonist asked who Stain was, to which Shoto replied that he was known as the hero killer. The protagonist admitted they had never heard of him, prompting the others to facepalm in disbelief. Izumi pointed at the man under the Nomu, declaring that he was Stain. The protagonist looked down at the man and remarked that he certainly was a Stain now, having been defeated by the Nomu. After class, the day internships were announced, Izuku was walking back to the dorms alone. Momo had gone ahead to review her internship offers. The search for the traitor had stalled, and with Bakugu absent, there was no pressing need for him to take action. It had been a long time since he had any free time, and since it was his rest day, he didn't even have plans to work out. He wasn't in the mood to deal with loud players in online games, and if he started playing something like DayZ or Tarkov, he would end up playing all night. So, he decided against gaming tonight, leaving him with nothing to occupy his time. Mineta called out to him, asking if he had a moment. Izuku glanced back to see his friend, accompanied by Denki, the notorious jokester of Class 1A. He smirked, jokingly suggesting a double date with Momo. Denki quickly interjected, urging Mineta to stop joking, as some girls were starting to believe it. Izuku laughed at Denki's discomfort. Mineta then shifted to a more serious tone, pleading for a favor. Izuku agreed to listen, giving him 5 minutes to explain. Mineta hesitated before revealing that he needed Izuku to strip. Izuku was taken aback, crafting a makeshift weapon in response and stepping back. Denki clarified that Mineta didn't mean it literally, they had gotten into a bit of trouble and needed help to resolve it. Izuku demanded to know how stripping was related to their predicament. Mineta explained that while they were outside the gym, they had bumped into Uraraka, Tsu, Mina, and Toru. In the chaos, Toru's camera had broken. Izuku was skeptical about their story and questioned why the girls were there in the first place. Denki shrugged, explaining that the girls were upset about the broken camera. Mineta added that they had offered to pay for it, but it turned out to be a custom-made camera, and the girls wanted something else as compensation. To Izuku's shock, Denki revealed that the girls wanted pictures of them without clothes. Izuku was bewildered, struggling to comprehend the situation. Denki tried to clarify, but Izuku insisted they explain it slowly, feeling as confused as ever. Mineta and Denki were surprised to learn that Izuku knew about a fan club dedicated to them. Mineta panicked, asking what they should do. Izuku reassured them to relax. He would handle it, advising them not to ask any further questions. He emphasized that Momo would take care of the situation. Mineta teased Izuku about being controlled by Momo, to which Izuku retorted that it was better than being alone. Denki chimed in, calling Izuku harsh. Izuku reminded them that Momo could be quite intimidating when necessary. Izuku felt the weight of the situation settle heavily on him. He looked at the 3 students before him, his expression turning serious. He asked them what they were doing out there without their mentors. Izumi explained that she had come to rescue Ida and called for backup, which was how Todoroki had arrived. Izuku turned his attention to Ida, questioning why he needed saving. Ida revealed his desire to confront Stain, seeking vengeance for what had happened to his brother and aiming to prove himself worthy of the hero name Ingenium. Izuku narrowed his eyes, his voice cold as he confronted Ida about the reckless risk he had taken, not just with his own life but with the lives and futures of his friends. Ida insisted that Stain was a villain who needed to be stopped. Izuku reminded him that a pro-hero would have handled the situation, and none of them were allowed to act outside the law. Ida tried to defend himself, but Izuku interrupted, asserting that he had not broken any laws and lived by a different code. He explained that personal feelings could not dictate actions, emphasizing that he had never crossed that line, even with his rival Bakugu. Izuku then pointed out that Ida had jeopardized not only his own hero career but also those of Izumi and Shoto. He offered Ida a chance to save them, but it would come at a steep price. He hopped off the defeated Nomu and crafted cork-sealing cuffs to restrain Stain, propping him against the wall, still alive but incapacitated. He called Ida over, but Shoto reminded him that Ida couldn't walk due to his injury. Izuku carried Ida to Stain, instructing Izumi and Shoto not to interfere. He handed Ida a pistol, urging him to aim it at Stain's head and pull the trigger. Ida was shocked and confused, struggling with the weight of the decision. Izumi pleaded with Ida not to go through with it, while Shoto expressed concern about the situation. Izuku snapped at them, insisting they didn't understand the gravity of the mistake Ida had made. Ida, torn between his emotions and the reality of his actions, acknowledged that he had put his friends in danger and needed to save them from his mistake. With tears streaming down his face, Ida raised the pistol, trembling but determined. He aimed at Stain and pulled the trigger. The loud bang echoed in the alley, causing Izumi to cover her face and Shoto to turn away. Ida dropped the pistol, overwhelmed by the weight of what he had done. Izuku asked Ida if he regretted saving his friends. Ida, still crying, admitted that he didn't regret it but felt the burden of his actions. He asked Izuku how he dealt with the guilt of taking a life. Izuku explained that one never truly gets over it. He focused on the lives he saved rather than those he had to take. Ida questioned what would happen next, fearing he would be taken to jail. Izuku smirked, asking why he would do that. Ida insisted he had killed Stain, but Izuku clarified that he had merely given Ida a chance to save his friends and himself. Confusion spread among the group as Izuku revealed that the gun had fired blanks, producing only the sound and flash of a real bullet without any harm done. He reassured them that he would never force someone to take a life, emphasizing that revenge only leads to destruction. Izuku then turned back to Stain, giving him a kick that elicited a groan of pain. Ida realized he hadn't killed Stain after all. Izuku reminded him that revenge was never the answer and urged him to learn from this experience. Finally, Izuku made a call to Sandstorm, informing him of the situation and the need for cleanup, while warning him that UA students were present. Sandstorm acknowledged the request, ready to assist. "I'll mark the Nomu for evacuation. Parabellum will want one for studies." There was no need to bother with that one. The heroes could handle it. I had another one tucked away in a back alley, which would be easier to retrieve. Sandstorm acknowledged the order and set off. While they were waiting, I asked Izumi and Shoto to explain how the entire situation had unfolded. After Sandstorm arrived, I contacted Nizu to ensure the heroes stayed away from our location and arranged for Native and Ida to be taken to the hospital. Nizu would make sure Native kept quiet about anything he might have seen. I reached out to HQ to arrange a pickup for the deceased Nomu. Shoto stayed with us until Endeavor arrived to collect him. When Endeavor saw the Nomu, he attempted to claim the body, likely wanting to take credit for its defeat. However, I removed my mask and reminded him of his place. To emphasize my point, I moved swiftly, placing a blade near his neck while Sandstorm aimed her weapon at him. The look of fear on his face made it clear he had no further thoughts of claiming victory. Shoto stood nearby, clearly amused by his father's fear, and soon left with him. Shortly after, HQ sent a team to recover the Nomu, and I had them take Stain as well. Perhaps Stain would have insights into what Toma was planning. I instructed Sandstorm to escort them back, despite her pouting about the necessity. I insisted it was important to ensure both the Nomu and Stain made it back to HQ safely, and I trusted her to handle the task. I told her we would meet later for a mission debrief and to report to HQ about the operation. She agreed and departed with the recovery team. During all this, Izumi had called Grand Torino. When he arrived, he scolded her for her recklessness before turning to me. Grand Torino asked if it was really me, and I confirmed it, mentioning that All Might had said he wanted to speak with me. He approached slowly, and I took a moment to observe him. Despite his age, he still radiated strength. He motioned for me to lean down, and as I did, he examined my face closely, tears welling in his eyes. Suddenly, he pulled me into a hug, catching me off guard. I remained still until he finally released me, wiping the tears from his eyes. Grand Torino invited me to his place, saying he had questions and assumed I had some for him as well. Once we arrived at Grand Torino's apartment, I looked around at the disarray. I asked what had happened there. Grand Torino explained that Izumi had been training hard, wanting to be strong enough to stand beside me. However, he clarified that wasn't the reason for my visit. He wanted to see my face after all these years. He mentioned that while we weren't related by blood, he had cared for me and Izumi when we were young. Surprised by this revelation, I tried to recall my early years and vaguely remembered an elderly man caring for us. I apologized, saying my memories were unclear. Grand Torino reassured me that it was fine and then got to the heart of the matter. He asked what had happened that night. I stiffened at the question, reluctant to revisit that part of my past. I subconsciously touched the scar under my left eye. Grand Torino acknowledged my hesitation but insisted he needed to know about that night. He explained that All for One had resurfaced then, only to go quiet again, and now villains were appearing everywhere. He believed there might be a connection. I sat in thought, recognizing the truth in his words. I didn't want to relive those memories, but the problems were escalating. The Nomu I had faced earlier were not as strong as the first, but they were still formidable. Suddenly, I recalled what Tamura had shouted during his escape. I decided to share my thoughts, telling Grand Torino he might want to take a seat, as my story would be long and difficult. I pulled up a chair and glanced toward the hallway where Izumi was resting. I noticed her hair peeking out from behind the doorway and decided to let her listen to the harsh realities of the world. If she wanted to become a hero, she would eventually encounter situations like this. I sat down, leaned back, and began my story. 10 years ago, a figure loomed over young Izuku, sharing unsettling truths about the world they lived in. The figure spoke of how society viewed Izuku as a burden, something that should not exist. All Izuku ever wanted was acceptance, love, and the chance to save others, yet he felt the weight of disdain from those around him. Even the greatest heroes, including his father, had cast him aside without hesitation. The figure continued, questioning Izuku's desire for change, a world where he could live freely, where he would not be an outcast, and where he could finally find a place to belong. Izuku sat in silence, his head bowed, absorbing the words that struck deep into his heart. The figure's voice resonated with his past suffering, and for a moment, Izuku found himself agreeing with the dark sentiments. As if sensing Izuku's internal struggle, the figure offered him a chance for greatness, extending a hand and promising power to reshape the world. Izuku hesitated, contemplating the implications of such a choice. Memories of happier times before he was labeled quirkless flooded his mind. Despite his resentment towards his family, he recognized the goodness that still existed within them and in others. He could not allow the mistakes of a few to dictate the fate of many. With newfound resolve, Izuku looked up and firmly rejected the offer, expressing his refusal with determination. He lunged at the figure's hand, hoping to distract him and escape. However, the figure merely chuckled at his efforts before effortlessly sending him crashing against the wall, laughing heartily at Izuku's defiance. The figure, amused by Izuku's strong will, approached him calmly, lifting him effortlessly. As he raised a finger that transformed into a sharp point, Izuku struggled against the grip, but it was futile. The figure brought the blade close, and Izuku felt a surge of panic. The pressure against his eye was unbearable, and he screamed, begging for it to stop. The figure continued his grim task, stopping only when the blade was embedded halfway. Izuku's world became a blur of pain and fear as the figure yanked the blade down, leaving him in a state of despair. He felt the warmth of blood and tears mix on his face, overwhelmed by the agony. The figure, seemingly unfazed, remarked on the necessity of his actions, assuring Izuku that he needed him alive. With a swift motion, the figure returned his finger to its original form and moved it back into Izuku's eye socket. Izuku felt the invasive touch, the sensation of his very being violated. The figure continued to manipulate the remnants of his eye, and Izuku could only scream as the pain intensified. As the figure completed his task, Izuku felt lightheaded, the world around him fading as he struggled to comprehend the torment inflicted upon him. The figure's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him of the darkness that lay ahead. In that moment, Izuku realized the depths of his suffering, the pain forever etched into his memory. Izuku had lost track of time and his surroundings. The first sensation that registered was the dull ache from the empty socket where his eye once was. He attempted to touch the area to ease the discomfort but found himself unable to do so. As he surveyed the dimly lit room, he noticed he was chained to a wall. There were no windows, only a single door. A familiar scent filled the air, one that sent a chill down his spine. Upon closer inspection, he saw more chains hanging from the walls, dark reddish stains marking the space between them, remnants of the last person who had been there. Panic surged within him. He felt hurt and utterly alone, wishing desperately to escape this dreadful place. Deep down, he had already lost hope of being rescued by any hero. The words of all for one echoed in his mind, and the actions of those he once admired confirmed his fears. No one cared for the quirkless or the weak. If he wanted to be saved, he would have to save himself. Forcing his panic and fear aside, he began searching for a way to free himself. Suddenly, a wave of drowsiness washed over him, and despite his struggle to stay awake, he succumbed to darkness. When he awoke again, bright lights flashed into his remaining eye. A voice greeted him, filled with a twisted excitement. The figure introduced themselves as Dr. Malo, a physician working for All for One. The doctor explained that Izuku was to be a test subject, as All for One wanted to experiment with quirks he had collected. Dr. Malo mentioned something about testing a healing quirk and breaking him, whatever that meant. Before Izuku could protest or ask questions, a GG was placed in his mouth, seemingly to prevent him from harming himself. His arms and legs were pulled in opposite directions, stretching his muscles painfully. He felt a sharp crack as his limbs dislocated, and the pressure built until he could barely contain his agony. The pain intensified, feeling as if his insides were ablaze while his skin was pierced by countless needles. Dr. Malo observed the effects of the healing quirk with clinical interest, noting how quickly Izuku's dislocated joints began to heal. The doctor moved on to the next test, producing a hammer and striking Izuku's hand. The renewed pain was overwhelming, and he could feel the bones breaking, yet the healing process began almost immediately, leaving behind fresh scars. The doctor continued his experiments, producing a glowing iron rod and placing it against Izuku's chest. The searing pain was unbearable, and he could smell his own flesh burning. After what felt like an eternity, the rod was removed, taking with it charred pieces of skin. The healing quirk activated once more, bringing a new wave of pain as it attempted to mend the damage. Time passed, and Dr. Malo maintained control over the tests conducted on Izuku. All for One would occasionally appear either in person or through a screen, asking if Izuku was ready to become his successor. Each time, Izuku refused, leading to another round of tests at the hands of Dr. Malo. All for One allowed the doctor to proceed as long as he did not kill or permanently cripple Izuku. The key word was permanent, and Izuku often found himself with broken limbs. It seemed that most of the quirks All for One had implanted in him were healing types, as if he were searching for the perfect one for a hidden purpose. Izuku focused on analyzing the quirks within him, becoming adept at discerning their strengths and weaknesses. Eventually, All for One realized that physical torture was no longer as effective as it once had been. The protagonist was becoming accustomed to pain, and with each passing day, their defiance grew stronger. In response, the tormentor shifted to mental anguish. The first method employed was a technique from the pre-quirk era known as white room torture. The protagonists found themselves confined in a stark, brightly lit room, isolated and fed only once a day. The solitary meal consisted of a bowl of plain rice and a glass of milk. With no means to track time, they gradually lost their grasp on reality. To cope with the oppressive environment, the protagonist closed their eyes and revisited their most painful memories. The betrayal by All Might, the bullying from a former best friend and a sister, the neglect from their mother, the traumatic experience of losing an eye to All for One, and the relentless tests conducted by Dr. Malo. Ironically, these painful recollections became a source of grounding. All for One's subsequent actions were even more devastating and difficult to bear. The protagonist struggled with self-forgiveness, despite knowing that All for One was primarily to blame. The tormentor would bring others before them, claiming that if the protagonist joined him, these individuals would be spared. They would crawl toward the protagonist, pleading for help, only to be met with a tragic fate at the hands of All for One. In their final moments, the victim's eyes reflected fear, despair, and a haunting sense of blame directed at the protagonist. Those accusing gazes left an indelible mark on their mind, a curse that lingered long after. The protagonist internalized their suffering, determined not to reveal to All for One that this psychological torment was affecting them. By this stage of captivity, All for One had ceased granting the protagonist any quirks and had taken away the ones previously bestowed. It seemed he recognized that the quirks were being used as a means of mental stability. What followed was a shift in All for One's approach. Instead of torture, he sought to utilize the protagonist. They were subjected to a barrage of drags that caused their body to heat up and dulled their senses. The memories of this PRD were hazy, as if the mind was actively resisting recollection. Yet, fragments occasionally surfaced. There were fleeting sensations, skin against skin, a warm breath on their neck, the feeling of teeth marking their flesh, and nails digging into their back. The most vivid fragment that remained was the image of yellow eyes paired with a demonic, fanged grin. I believe that AFO decided that if I couldn't be broken, then perhaps he could create a successor using me. I think he used me as a means to an end, and I would come up with a theory years later as to why he did this. He believed that AFO must have thought or learned that a different version of One for All could be passed down through descendants. Since AFO had possession of a blood relation to all might and willing servants, he must have thought it was worth testing the theory. He sat still, waiting for Grand Torino to respond after sharing his past. Grand Torino expressed his shock, acknowledging that he had heard it was bad, but never imagined it was that severe. He inquired about the last part, asking if anything had come of it. The young man sighed, feeling a wave of sadness wash over him. He admitted that he honestly didn't know, as that part lasted about a month, maybe longer. It was during that time that he was rescued, and he liked to think there wasn't a child involved, but he couldn't be sure. He emphasized that this information should remain confidential among the three of them. Very few people knew the full details of his time there, and only his father, Hisashi, was aware of the last part. He planned to tell his fiancée about it someday, but now was not the right time. Grand Torino assured him that they wouldn't tell a soul, turning to Izumi as he spoke. Just then, Izumi emerged from her hiding place and rushed toward him, leaping into his arms and hugging him tightly. She expressed her sorrow, feeling responsible for his suffering. He smiled softly, recognizing her genuine regret. He stroked her hair and patted her head, trying to comfort her. He urged her to calm down, assuring her that it wasn't her fault. AFO had orchestrated everything, and it would have happened regardless. He asked her to look into his eyes and told her that he forgave her, trusting her enough to share his past. He warned her not to make him regret it. Izumi promised that she would never hurt him again, hugging him tightly once more. Slowly but surely he was learning to forgive, and he could only wonder what challenges life would present to him next. The days before the sports festival were filled with anticipation and excitement. Mina had been consumed by a relentless curiosity that had transformed into a challenge. Ever since she overheard the boys discussing Midoriya's physique, she felt an irresistible urge to see him without his shirt. Although she knew Yamamoto had already claimed him, she couldn't help but admire Midoriya. He was undeniably attractive, intelligent, kind, and had a hint of unpredictability that made him even more appealing. Mina was determined to find a way to catch a glimpse of him shirtless. The girls had already gotten a sneak peek when they celebrated his awakening from a coma. After hearing him sing a heartfelt song, they had all rushed to hug him, and Mina had felt his well-defined muscles for the first time. The memory made her heart race, and she realized she wasn't alone in her admiration. Her friends shared the same interest, evident from their flushed faces. With this in mind, Mina decided to text the girls, excluding Kyoka and Momo, unsure of how they would react to her plans. Later that night, she gathered those who had responded in her room, closing and locking the door behind her. Mina began her speech, explaining her intentions. She expressed her desire to see Midoriya without his shirt, insisting that her friends felt the same way. Izumi hesitantly raised her hand, expressing her discomfort with the idea, revealing that Midoriya was her brother. The revelation shocked everyone, leading to a flurry of questions about family dynamics. Mina, undeterred, continued to rally her friends, emphasizing how unfair it was that Yamamoto had all of Midoriya while they had not even gotten a glimpse. She described the impressive physique she had seen, recalling how amazing it felt to touch his muscles. Despite Izumi's protests, Ochako admitted her interest in Midoriya, recalling how he had saved her during the entrance exam. Toru and Tsu quickly joined in, eager to see more of him as well. Mina felt a surge of excitement as they all agreed to the plan, even if Izumi was still reluctant. Mina then turned to Izumi, asking her to share details about Midoriya's habits and routines. Izumi was taken aback by the request to spy on her brother, but Mina insisted it was necessary for their plan. Toru suggested they enlist the help of a talented inventor from the support course who could assist them in their endeavor. With a plan beginning to take shape, Mina felt a thrill of anticipation. Soon, she would find a way to see the hidden side of Midoriya that she had been longing for.